Welcome. As I say, social media uncovered. So I'm Hayley Williams and really delighted to be running this session for you today on behalf of the Brecks partnership. I am just going to kick off now. Just got somebody else to admit. So let's get started. Here's today's agenda. So these are the areas which it's my duty and my job today to make sure that you go away feeling that you have been able to achieve some of these things. So we're going to go through the major social media platforms, and I'm going to help you in doing that identify which is the most effective for you. So some of you here today will already be very familiar with the social media platforms that are right for your organisation or association, and some of you will have personal experience of using those platforms already. But there could be a platform out there that you're not aware of or that you're not using that could be really good for you depending on your goals. And so I'm going to showcase some of the sort of key component parts of some of those key platforms so that you can make a judgment as to what might be right for you. I'm also going to share some tips and tricks and hints with you as to how best to create that social media content, how best to create it in terms of, the scheduling of it, how to measure it and report on it and so on, so you can make sure it's being truly effective for you as well. And all of that is focused on helping you build through future content that best supports your aims for your organisation or initiative. I'm also going to help you gain clarity and strengthen your knowledge on organic and on advertising. So a number of you might have participated in social media advertising before. It's a really good way of being able to boost reach and boost engagement from your all important audiences. So we're going to have a chat about that today as well, because for some of you who haven't perhaps dipped your toes in because you're not quite sure what the benefits might be or how best to make it work, we can talk about that as well. And last but not least, I'm going to share some of the hidden tools that can help support your proactive media activity on social media. So, actually all these things take time, don't they? And they take effort. And there are some tools out there that can help. So let's have a look at those as well as we run through so that we can make sure that, where there is support available, you're utilising it. Okay, so we've done poll number 1. And I mentioned to you that I've got a number of other questions which I'm going to ask you during the session today. And when a poll comes up, you're going to see this graphic. So this is just to represent when I'm going to be asking you to give me your thoughts. So watch out for those through the presentation. And what I'll also say to you as well, we have worked in a comfort break. I'm conscious that we've allocated sort of 3 hours for this session. So I'm really aware it's a long time to listen to me talk. It's a long time to have to concentrate and to have your eyes on a screen. So we will work in that comfort break just so you get a chance to stretch your legs, put a cuppa on and just to come back refreshed for the second part. So looking forward to giving you a break as well in your learning, because these things can be quite tiring. Okay, so I want to start with our first sort of segment really, which is all focused on, well, why are you on social media? And actually it's the first question we need to start with, because before we can sort of uncover what's important about it, and before I can train you on some of those key tools and hints and tips, we just need to be really clear on why you're on social media in the first place. Because as I said, it takes a lot of time to curate the content. It takes a lot of time to post it, to think about how people are engaging with you. And so actually, if you're doing all of those things, you need to be really clear on what that purpose is and what that value is for your organisation or initiative. So that's going to be something that I ask you about. But first, I'd just like to give you a sense as to what the purpose of social media is more widely. Now, for those of you who've worked marketing agencies before, you will know that occasionally in marketing we like an acronym. So I have one to share with you, and this one is SLIM, and it gives us a sense as to what the purpose of social media is. And what I'd like you to think about from your own perspective when I'm going through what each of these kind of letters means in the acronym is think about, well, how does that relate to me, to my organisation, to my initiative? Because there'll be one of these that particularly stands out to you. So SLIM, sharing. Social media is ultimately, at its heart, it's all about sharing. It's taking a message and it's broadcasting it and it's sharing it with others. And so actually that's at the heart of everything that we do on social media. It's taking that content and putting it somewhere where others can see it. And so it's sharing. And so actually, if we take that more widely, if we think about those of you who are working for not-for-profits and charities and so on, actually you want to be sharing details about the value of what you do and the impact that it's making. And that's really emotive and really powerful. So, just think about when you're using social media, what is it that you want to share and what are you sharing? Next is learning. So we're going to talk about a number of different social media platforms today, but a lot of the reasons why people perhaps want to use it as an organisation is to impart learning. So one of the things that we do within our organisation is we work with B2Bs as well, and some of those organisations might be membership bodies, and they might be manufacturers and so on, and they actually want to be able to upskill the knowledge and awareness of the individuals that they work with. And social media can be a really good way of sharing knowledge and imparting that knowledge to others. So learning. It's also about interacting. So we talk a lot about communities, don't we, within the space that we work, and actually it's about individuals and groups of people being able to come together that have a shared interest or a shared purpose or a shared goal. And actually social media gives us the ability to be able to interact with those groups and interact with those individuals. And what's really empowering, I think, about that interaction piece as well is social media gives us a chance to reach people we might not reach otherwise, or to reach new people that could benefit from the things that we do and the things that we're saying. So interaction is a big part of social media purpose as well. And finally, marketing. So specifically in terms of, raising brand awareness, increasing sales leads. So actually social media is a channel to be able to get a marketing message to a prospect or to a customer or to a buyer. And so that's really the purpose of social media, broken down into an acronym. And so, thinking about, how you guys are using social media, think about what it is that you want to share, what knowledge you want to impart, how do you want to interact with your current audiences or new audiences? And, are there elements that you want to market? Do you want to boost brand awareness? Do you want to sort of drive leads to a website or increase sales? So all of those things are really important. Now, if we flip that round, we can also say a lot of those things, maybe barring the last one of marketing, are the reasons why people go onto social media as well, because they want to, we're all generally as a human race hungry for knowledge. So as individuals, we want to be able to share on social media some of the things that we're doing, the holidays we've gone on with our family, or maybe, share something we're really passionate about, but we also want to learn from others as well. And actually interacting online, especially during COVID, became a way of us being able to keep in touch with the individuals and organisations that are important to us. So on the one hand, think about how those words relate to you as an organisation, but also think about them in terms of how they relate to your audiences, because they are also going onto social media to access those things too. So that's the purpose of social media. Okay, so now I'd like to talk a little bit specifically about some of the benefits. Now, some of these things won't be new to you. For those of you that are using social media already and have made decisions as to why that's a really good channel to be able to cascade your message, you will already be familiar with these benefits and probably some of the challenges as well. But for any of you that are looking at maybe sort of stepping into this the first time, or you're being asked by your organisation to run the social media activity, some of these things will be quite interesting to look at. So generally, social media as a whole, so not individual platforms, as a whole, that channel, that entity, these are the key benefits. So you can join for free. So actually, compared to, maybe, other forms of marketing and other forms of engagement, there's no, cost fee, the primary level for this. It gives you the ability to reach new audiences. It gives you the ability to have a direct connection with your audience. You've got that power to create your own narrative. So, actually, what do you want to say? And you've got the broadcast mechanisms to do it. You have got access into paid advertising, but usually that's quite cost effective. So for not-for-profit organisations and charitable initiatives that don't always have budgets available, that can be really powerful. It gives you the ability to build your brand at a grassroots level as well. So, we work with some very small community-based organisations that might just work in a town, and actually social media gives them the ability to build their brand with that group in the area that they represent, without, too much sort of effort or investment being made commercially. But there are also some sort of like key marketing drivers as well. So actually, you know, for us, when we're working with an organization, you know, a lot of the time we're wanting to drive traffic to a website. So think of social media as your shop window. So if we were walking down our high street, you know, I get particularly distracted by bright, shiny things in windows. I might have a look in the shop window and then think I want to go in. Social media can be your shop window, and then stepping over the threshold into the shop is actually then maybe them going to your website. So it can be a really good way of getting people to then land on your site, to find out more about your initiative, to sign up to something, or to potentially you know, look around and understand more about what you do. Another real good marketing asset for social media is around that clear evaluation of performance. So, you know, we know that when you go to an event, for instance, you can talk to people and you can look into the whites of their eyes and you can see immediately whether you connect with them and whether they're maybe enjoying that event and so on. When you maybe put an article into your local newspaper, or when you put an advert out into maybe a parish magazine, you don't always know initially how that's landed or has it performed, how many people have really seen that and how many people have really understood it and engaged with it. And social media gives you the ability to do that. I'm going to talk about measurement later on today. And measurement of your activity is absolutely crucial, and it can be such a buzz. I'm going to show you a case study later of a client that we worked with that weren't sure that social media was the right place for their initiative. And actually, through the evaluation of the performance, we could show them that it really was. And we could say, look at these hundreds of people that have engaged in your content and are commenting on what you're doing. So it's a really great way to be able to evaluate how you're doing. And also you can uncover valuable insights. So it's a great way of understanding what your audiences really want to see and hear from you. So we run social media for a number of organisations, and we tailor their content depending on what we know their audience resonate mostly with. So for them, we know that sort of content-rich articles are really important, for instance, for one of our clients. And so we're doing more of that on social media. So you can give your audience more of what they need and what they're asking for. So I'm a positive person, so I'm all about the benefits. So I could not run a training session without talking about the challenge as well. And I'm sure that many of you will resonate with these too. So it takes time. So actually, none of these things happen by magic. You know, you're here today because you're perhaps the ones that are responsible for the social media within your organisation. I don't know whether any of you potentially, you know, look at how much time you spend. But if you were to add it up, perhaps over a week, over a month, it does take time. And so it's got to be effective and it's got to feel that it's valuable. And it can become a distraction as well. So it can be very easy to all of a sudden, you know, lose an hour. You know, you're going on there to do one thing and all of a sudden, you know, you get distracted by something else you see on the platform. And before you know it, you're sucked in. And so that's a real challenge. Free doesn't mean no cost. And so that really links back to that time side of things. So your time is valuable. And if we were to put a cost on your time, actually think about that in terms of how much effort you're putting into social media. And we also see that organisations can become very dependent on social media as well. And so you've got to think about, yes, it has a place, but is it your everything? And if you're just on social media, you're perhaps not thinking about, you know, those audiences that aren't on social media. So we need to be really careful in terms of digital exclusion, and making sure that if an audience is online, brilliant, let's try and find them on social media. But if they're not, don't just put all your eggs in one basket, because you're potentially missing out on opportunities elsewhere. Now, sometimes we see organisations are a bit concerned about stepping into social media, maybe for the first time, because they're concerned about that negative feedback. Now, I don't know how many of you might be in local groups, perhaps for your own parishes or towns, or how many of you are in groups for particular interest areas, but occasionally you can see some pushback and you can see some negativity, and that can be something that can make people nervous. And so we need to be really mindful of that as well. Is that sometimes people go onto social media because they're cross. We see this quite a bit with big brands, so for customer service. So it's really interesting now, isn't it, from the point of transparency. If you were looking to buy something from a new an organisation, so perhaps you find someone who you know, is selling really great umbrellas. We need them this time of year, don't we? And you think they look great, they're different to any other umbrella I ever saw. But if you were to look on their Facebook page or their Twitter feed, and you can see it's full of people going, where's my, you know, where's my umbrella, or where's my refund, or being cross about the quality, you're not likely to buy that product. So actually that piece around brand equity is really important. But yeah, that negative feedback can sometimes be a challenge for organisations. You also have no control over others, so in terms of what they say and what they do with your information. And if there's a number of you that are involved in social media as well, actually, if you don't have a social media strategy, you've not necessarily got control over what each other is posting as well. And so before you know it, you could have two people that post 5 minutes apart because they don't know that each other is in the platform, or you could have content that's duplicated and it's not expected to be duplicated because you haven't got a content plan that everyone's working from. So that point of view of control is really important as well. Another challenge is you have to wait to see results. So it's not the same as face-to-face. So, you know, for instance, if you were thinking that you wanted to run a campaign on Facebook to promote an event that you had coming up, the event might be in a month. Actually, it can take time for people to express their interest in an event and to book on. They might need to hear from you a number of times on social media. So you don't always know immediately whether something's landed. And, you know, as it's wrapped up there as well, how do you know what to say and where to say it and to understand where it's working? I think that's the number one challenge. If we could scoop it all up together, it comes down to, you know, where do you put your information? What does that information need to be? And how do you know whether it's working or not? And they're all the things that we're going to tackle in the session today. Okay, so it's poll time again. So we've got lovely hands up there. So I have got a poll that I'd like to put to you. And what I'd like to understand from you is what's the number one reason you are on social media for your organisation or your initiative? Now, this might be a tough question to answer because in many cases you're on it for more than one reason. But what I'd really like you to do is, so in that icon that you'll see in the bottom menu, so the triangle, the square and the circle, you should see that poll that's now live. So the number one reason you're on social media. So boosting brand awareness, driving traffic to your website, generating new leads. So we've got sales leads down there. It might not be sales leads. It might be, you know, leads for other things. You want to build a community around your organization. You might want to recruit and retain staff or volunteers. Or you might want to undertake social listening. So social listening, for those of you who are maybe not necessarily as familiar with that, that's in a sense trying to understand what a community group might think and feel about a particular topic or issue or situation. So often that's sort of more widely. So, you know, for instance, it might be around sort of like a key issue in your local area around housing, for instance, or it might be around infrastructure sort of more widely. It could be social listening around something politically. Okay, so we've got 11 votes so far. I will let this go for a little bit longer and then we'll close the votes just so we can see who, you know, who has voted and what everyone's thinking. So sort of last minute on this. So boosting brand awareness, driving traffic, generating new leads, building a community, recruiting and retaining staff and volunteers, or social listening. Okay, so we've got 17 votes now. So I will end the poll in just a second and I will share that so that you can see that all as well. So here we go, just ending the poll now. And so let's have a look. So that should be loading for you all now so that you can see. Okay, so number one reason, and I'm conscious it's a tricky question because you'll be on social media for lots of reasons, but number one around boosting brand awareness. Number one around building a community around your organisation, which is excellent to see because actually we talked about the benefits around social media being it is a place where you can build a community and communities will be incredibly important to the, you know, the purpose and the value you have with your initiative. So building a community, excellent, good to see that. Boosting brand awareness is 6, so that's a key one, absolutely. You know, a lot of the time people need to know, like and trust your brand before they even want to feel that they can step into your community. So that's great to see that high as well. I'm not surprised to see recruiting and retaining staff and volunteers is a big one as well. We know that there's a challenge right now generally in the market around organisations being able to find and retain staff. And a big part of that is, you know, people want to feel that they know the organisation that they're coming into and there's competition for talent. So using social media for that is excellent. And the same for the volunteer base as well. We do a lot of work with not-for-profits who are needing to build their volunteer base, and social media can be a great way to reach those people. So good to see that as well. And then we've also got driving traffic, increasing leads and social listening in there as well. But I think what the results of that poll show us is that actually, you know, it's different for every organization, isn't it? And so it's really important to be thinking about that number one reason and purpose when you interact on social media and when you're thinking about how to build your activity. So thank you to those of you who've participated in that poll. That's great to sort of see that real variance that there is. Okay, so what I'd like to do at this point is to have a look at some of the top social media statistics to give you a sense as to the here and now as to each of those platforms. And some of these numbers might be familiar to you and some might not. So it just gives you a sense as to the scale of this sector that you guys are working in. Okay, so here are all the main ones. So you're probably going to familiarise yourself with a lot of those icons. We see them quite a bit. I'm going to touch on each of them. And then as the training progresses, we are going to move into some very specific guidance on what we see as those key platforms. So we have the platforms of Facebook and Instagram, which are owned by Meta. And some of you will know that Threads has come on board quite recently as well. We have LinkedIn, which is often seen as the sort of the professional LinkedIn platform for individuals within their sectors to be able to engage with each other. We've got Snapchat, which is predominantly focused on the younger generation. So I'm going to share some stats on that. We've got Pinterest, which is sort of falls outside of that ability of being able to form a community as such, but it is a social media platform which people do go to in their droves to be able to interact with. TikTok has really smashed through the market in the last few years, so we're going to talk about that as well. I think you're probably all quite familiar with the new brand for Twitter being called X. I find it quite interesting that when anyone talks about X now, they talk about X, formerly known as Twitter. So it hasn't dropped the Twitter description yet, but we know Elon Musk has made a number of changes there. So we'll talk about that as well. And we've also put YouTube down on there. So again, not necessarily thought of perhaps as a traditional social media space, because it's not an area where you can directly converse with your audiences, but it is a community that people go into to be able to undertake that sharing of their own content and that learning and that interacting. And so for some of you, it's worth thinking about whether YouTube is a place for you to be able to share your news as well. Okay, so let's dive into each of these in some detail. So starting with Facebook, you'll see that there's nearly, sorry, I've kicked my mouse over. You'll see that there are nearly 45 million people in the UK alone that interact on social media. And although Facebook has been around for a long time, and lots of other social media platforms have come in since Facebook, it really is a mainstay. And although it's fallen out of favour with the younger users, actually it's still around and it's more popular than ever. And as you can see there, 44% of people use Facebook in the UK every day in some way or shape or form. And so it's a huge number of people that are there. Now, I'm conscious that not all of them are going to be your audience, but it's really good for you to be able to appreciate that there is probably a fair proportion of the people you want to engage with are on Facebook. And if they're not engaging with you already, they are probably engaging in something else that means that they'd be interested in what you serve, or they're engaging in something else that means you can ask Facebook to find them. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. Okay, so 44% of people in the UK are on it every day, and the average amount of time they spend on Facebook is 23 minutes. And so it's a good amount of time. People aren't just hopping on and off the platform, they are spending a lot of time on that platform. A lot of that is interacting with their family and friends. So it's a great place for people to be able to keep up to date with what all their families and friends are doing. So a lot of the time people are sharing images. There may be posting details of where they've been, maybe for dinner. And then maybe sort of sharing kind of updates as to what's maybe going on with their family and more widely. But we also know Facebook is a place where people engage in their local communities. And so through the work that we do in local authorities and, you know, through my own work as an active member of my local community in St. Neots, we see community groups are highly active. And so some of that time that people spend on Facebook, that 23 minutes, will yes be interacting with their family and friends, but it's likely to be interacting in those local community groups, and it's likely to be interacting in those areas of interest to them. And because they're spending so much time on social media, on Facebook, all of that data in terms of, which groups they're in, which interests they have, which ads they click on, all of that data is harnessed by Meta, and they make it available for you to advertise against. And so it's really interesting, if you're thinking of going onto Facebook for the first time, or you're looking to recruit new volunteers for your initiative, or if you want to make people of a certain demographic aware of a particular event you've got coming up, actually using Facebook ads to boost your content can be a really quick and easy way of being able to do that for a very, very small amount of money. So one of the projects that we've worked on, to give you sort of an illustration over the last 2 years, is an ecology project in the Cambridgeshire Fens called New Life on the Old West. And Mike King, who's on the call today from Resources for Change, has also been involved in that programme as well. And we created the brand identity, the messaging and the strategy from scratch about 2.5 years ago, and have been helping them tell their story over the last couple of years. And their social media platform started from zero, and they run a number of events, and we set them up with Facebook, and we said, you know what, we know you're running these events in the local parishes and communities, but actually you don't have the connections there, you don't have the community base. Let's undertake a very small amount of Facebook advertising to be able to draw awareness and raise awareness of what you're doing with people who actually live and work in that vicinity. And using all of the Facebook tools, we were able to do that to really good success levels. So we were able to say, you know what, we've only got £5 a day, we've only got £30 for the week. It's not very much money, but actually Facebook, can you make sure that our ad on Facebook is being seen to people who live within a 5-mile radius of that particular parish? And can you make sure it's only being shown to people who've already expressed an interest in wildlife, in environment, within nature photography, etc.? And so you can be really, really specialist in your advertising. And because we know people are spending so much time on Facebook, I'd encourage you to think about whether that might be an angle or an avenue for you. I'm sorry this is going to be a bit small for you, but what I wanted to just do, hopefully you can see this. I just wanted to share with you again on Facebook how the users sort of balance out. So on the access that goes sort of top to bottom, that's our user bands. So you see age bands used in lots of things. So at the top we've got age 13 to 17, and then all the way to the bottom we have the 65 plus. So that's what you see from left to right. From top to bottom. From left to right, it's percentages. So what we can see there is that Facebook is predominantly still used the most by individuals that fall into the 25 to 34 age bracket. So nearly 25% of Facebook users are still in that age bracket. So again, if you think that Facebook is the right place for you, or if that's where you're finding the most success at the moment, actually just be really mindful of the demographic breakdown. So depending on what you're wanting to engage with your community for, depending on what you're selling, actually if you've got something within that age band, they're the ones that are most likely to see your content in the 25 to 34. You can then break that down further, and Facebook can give you lots of stats around male versus female. They can also give you stats around particular interest areas and so on. But what this does show is that if you're looking to market to people between 13 and 17, Facebook is not your place. It's perhaps the place to be able to communicate to their parents, but not to those individuals themselves. And you can see that as the ages go up, the level of interaction goes down. Now, that's not to say that if you're trying to recruit perhaps people who are retired, that Facebook isn't a place for you, but it's just that they're less likely to spend time on there. So your audience numbers, that reach, the amount of eyeballs on it is perhaps going to be slightly less, but it's not to say it's not a place for you. So it's always worth just having a look at what the demographics are saying for Facebook to help decide how much effort you put in there. Okay, so let's move on to Instagram. So Instagram has also got a large number of users, so over 30 million. It was bought by Meta, who owned Facebook a number of years ago, because they saw the benefit in having it as part of their portfolio. And for those of you that are familiar with it, you'll know it's very much image-based, visually rich social media platform. So it's a place where people can share beautifully curated images. So over 30 million people are using Instagram in the UK. So it's a huge number of people. For you as social media kind of instigators, it has huge value in the fact that it connects to Facebook. So actually, if you're going in and putting content in the back end of your Facebook account, it gives you the ability to be able to post that on Instagram as well. So that's definitely, you know, a benefit and a strength of it. And it's the same with the advertising as well. If you're looking at running ads for an audience, you can tick a button to say you want those ads to run on Instagram as well. So big numbers on Instagram. In terms of the population as a whole, it's 46% of people in the UK who are using it actively. So again, a huge number of people are on Instagram. It does have some challenges though in terms of that messaging, depending on, you know, what your organisation is, because the image has to lead the story. And so this works really, really well if you've got exceptional imagery within your organisation or your initiative. But if you haven't, that's where it can potentially be a struggle, because Instagram is based on that kind of beautiful visual picture. Another challenge with Instagram is that you can't put any links in your content. So we're going to talk later about the construction of a really great social media post for something like Facebook or LinkedIn. And what's great about that is that you can have this great content, and then you can hook people so they're interested, and then you can have them click to find out more. You can't do that on Instagram. You can have a separate page where you have all your links on, but within that predominant content piece, you can't do that. So you can't get that instant engagement and send people away from Instagram to something else. But if you're in an environment where images are very powerful, it can be a really, really strong place to be. It can also be a great way of being able to use video content. So Instagram over the last couple of years has implemented stories and reels. And so stories is the ability to be able to share content that's just live for 24 hours, and that you can use a mix of images, videos. You can overlay it with music, with captions, and with emojis and icons as well. And again, it can be a really good way of engaging with an audience. And you've also got reels as well, which are vertical. And so by that, it means if you had your mobile phone, it would appear this way. So if you are out at an event, or you have a a particular premises, or your job is to go out into the local community and local parks and green spaces and so on, you could use reels to capture very short, sharp, bite-sized pieces of video, and through Instagram stitch them together and share them on your platform. So it can work very, very well for those sorts of things as well. A lot of people who are on Instagram are using it to, again, follow their family and friends, but also to follow brands and communities of interest to them. So I'd encourage you to think about whether Instagram is a place for that. I'm not talking about threads in this presentation. So although that's part of the Meta portal as well, it actually, I think jury's still out as to how that's developing. The audience numbers aren't necessarily there yet, but Threads, just to give you sort of a whistle-stop tour of it, it's sort of a competitor to X and Twitter. So it's that ability for short-form content in a way that Twitter has performed well at in the past, but jury's still out as to how that's developing. So it's something perhaps to keep an eye on. But we always say in marketing generally, go to the place where your audiences already are. It can be hard enough to engage with them, so you've got to start in the places where they are and go to them, because they won't always come to you. And so Threads isn't necessarily that place yet, but Facebook and Instagram certainly could be, depending on your audience. So have a think about those. And again, just to give you a sense by age, so you'll see here, interestingly, the most popular age demographic for use on Instagram is, again, that 25 to 34, so the same as Facebook. But you've also got a very high number of younger users on Instagram as well, so that 18 to 25, so nearly similar, so 26% compared to 30% of that slightly older, but very small numbers in the older demographic. Probably smaller than Facebook. So again, in terms of Instagram, if that's a place you want to be, just be really mindful of the age of the organisations that your organisations or individuals that you're looking to deal with there. Okay, TikTok. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with TikTok or active on TikTok, but it really is coming up the rankings in terms of its popularity. So it's now the 7th most used social media app in the world. So you can see Facebook's number 1, YouTube's number 2, WhatsApp is number 3. So, it's how people interact with each other and communicate with each other, but businesses are only just starting to use WhatsApp in that way, and it tends to be bigger organizations that are using WhatsApp. We've got Messenger as well, which is linked to Facebook, so that's really popular. We've got text messages, which are also still very popular, and Instagram as well. And TikTok is very much coming up the rankings. And what's really interesting about TikTok is in terms of the demographic that particularly interacts on TikTok. So if we look at most people use it through their smartphone, so this isn't something that they'll do on desktop. Facebook is definitely, mobile and desktop, as is Instagram. TikTok is all about people on their mobile phone. It's that scroll. They're constantly scrolling on TikTok, and they're using their mobile phones to create the content as well. So it's really, really popular with that younger demographic. So it's got 18 to 24-year-olds down on there. What's really interesting about TikTok is the stats aren't telling us in this graphic about that younger demographic as well, but we also know TikTok is really popular with teenagers, and it's very popular if you're looking to sell products for that audience as well. So I've got a teenage daughter, and she is absolutely obsessed with skincare. It seems to be a big trend for teenagers at the moment. Unfortunately, I'm not a very popular mum. I haven't let her have TikTok yet, but all over TikTok there is skincare trends, and it's people sharing their hacks and their trends for how to do things, and products are selling in their millions based on people sharing them on TikTok. So for products, it can work really, really well. So again, all about thinking about your audience. Is that the right demographic for you? Things to think about for TikTok is it's the leading place for short form video content. So, this isn't about sharing words or sharing images per se. It's all about short, sharp content. Organizations are using it effectively. And so what I would say to you is, if you are, coming at this from the voluntary space, do have a look at how other people are using TikTok in your space, because it can be a good way to be creative. And we've seen some of the national organisations do that, but it can be very hard to break through. TikTok trends tend to have a lot of money thrown behind them. So my advice would be, be really mindful as to how much time you spend on there. It needs to be right for your audience. But what I can tell you is the average viewer spends nearly an hour on the app every day. It doesn't mean they're necessarily going to see your content, because they're scrolling constantly, and it is competition to be seen, I suppose, but there's a real appetite for people to engage in that platform. Okay, so let's look at Twitter. So in terms of Twitter, there's 16 million people in the UK who use it. It's been in the news quite a bit in the recent, probably 12 months or so. I'm just getting my extra notes in front of me here. So it's just over a year ago that Elon Musk bought it. Surprisingly enough, a staggering 44 billion dollars he spent on that. So this is a man with much bigger budgets than any of us have. And interestingly, he bought it on that brand equity, because Twitter's never been able to really sort of strengthen its sales function in terms of how it makes money. It's predominantly an organic platform that has grown in popularity with its users, but it's going through a real period of flux right now, and it's undergone quite a few changes. And so what I wanted to just sort of say about Twitter is that there is a prediction that the level of growth is really going to dive over the next few years. And from our perspective as a marketing consultancy, we've been asked by a number of our clients, what do you think about Twitter? Should we still be putting all of our content on Twitter? We're not getting high enough engagement on the platform anymore. What should we do? And, you know, I think we've got to look at that as a platform. You know, if it's not being as engaging for you and it's not giving you the results that you need, or it's not getting the eyeballs on your content, you've got to think about whether it's the right place. So just to be mindful of that. For those of you who are on Twitter, just have a look at your performance reports and make sure it's still, you know, performing well for you. Where Twitter works exceptionally well, although I should call it X now because otherwise Elon's going to be cross with me, where it works really well is for live in the moment topical things. So there are some, you know, awful things happening all over the world at the moment, and we hear every day about what's happening, you know, in Gaza with Israel and so on. And actually X is forming to be a place where people who are living and breathing that right now are often able to, you know, tell their stories and post some of those things that they're seeing on the ground and that are happening. Interestingly, it's often the first place where things get posted if there's a problem. So occasionally Facebook might go down and people put it onto X first. So it's a really great place to be able to find kind of real life, real time updates on things. The other area where Twitter works really well is in events, because Twitter works predominantly on connecting the dots through hashtags. And I'll talk a little bit about hashtags later as well. But for you know, you see them all over the place and you're perhaps familiar with them. But hashtags, in essence, are almost like a word that connects everything together. And so where hashtags come into effect is often at events. So for instance, you know, you might go to an event for your sector or an event in your local community, and it's likely that there will be a hashtag that's available for that. So for instance, you know, we go to national conferences with some of our clients. Those conferences will always have a hashtag, and then when you're at the event, you post your content and then you put that hashtag at the end, and in essence what it does is it then collects all of that content into one place that all uses that hashtag. And if you click on that in X, it means you get to see all the content that anyone else has put onto that hashtag. So if you happen to be at an event or you had a particular area of interest, you could search as such on X using that hashtag to see all the other content that's been put through on there. So it's great for brand awareness at events. It's great for activity at events because you can see who else is in the room and what people are saying and so on. So it gives you sort of like a cut of all of the noise that's happening across X sort of internationally. The other area where hashtags work really well is things like awareness days. So for instance, we're in November now, aren't we? I can't see you all at the moment because I'm sharing my slides, and I don't know whether any of you are participating in this, but in November it's Movember, which is where it encourages the gentlemen to not shave for the whole month. Movember has a hashtag and it's across everything, and so if you then want to be able to engage in that content and to see what people are saying, the hashtag is there to be able, you know, to dive into all of that. So hashtags are brilliant. They're across all the other social media platforms as well, but for events and real life topical stuff, it's worth having a look at it, particularly on X. And then what I'd also say about hashtags is think about, could you create your own? I'm going to give you a case study later about a program that we've been involved in, and we created a hashtag for them because we wanted a way of being able to bind all their content together across their social media platforms. So that's something to have a think about. And also think about other people who are using hashtags as well. So, you know, who are your partners, who are your suppliers, who are your referrers, and then you can also connect in with them as well. Okay, I'd like to talk about LinkedIn. So although it's not the platform at all for engaging with community in its purest sense around, you know, residents and stakeholders bound to a place in a local community, it is an online community in its own right for professionals. So for those of you who are wanting to represent your organisations in a professional manner, or for those of you who want to engage with individuals of a professional nature, LinkedIn can be a really powerful way of doing that. Nearly 37 million people are engaging on LinkedIn in the UK. So it's a huge number. And again, that kind of like golden thread of that perfect age bracket is still 25 to 34. So they're the people who are on it the most. But we've got a whole range of sort of working age population that are involved in LinkedIn. And people go on to LinkedIn quite often, and they spend an average of just over 7.5 minutes on the platform each time. And so it's a really interesting space for you to think about whether it's relevant for you. Now, some of you said you wanted to boost brand awareness, and what I'd encourage you to think about is, well, who do you need to boost that brand awareness with? If it's your beneficiaries in your local community, that's great, and there's other platforms for that won't be LinkedIn. But if you want to boost brand awareness in terms of talking about the expertise of your team or demonstrating some of the impact you've made through your projects, then I'd encourage you to think about how you can do that through the professional platform of LinkedIn. Some of you may have already a company page, you're likely to have your own personal profiles, but it's a really great way of being able to demonstrate that expertise. And it's amazing how much people do engage in that content. I've gone to events before where people will say to me, oh, I saw you did that project, or oh, I can see it's a busy time for you guys right now because I saw this and this. And so people do absorb that content, so it's definitely worth thinking about whether that could be a potential place for you. And there's also LinkedIn groups, so you can create your own group around a shared community interest, and that can work really well on LinkedIn, just as it does in Facebook as well. So yes, something to think about there in terms of LinkedIn being a good platform to look at. And now what I want to do is, I haven't been able to talk about all of them. I'm conscious we've got a lot to cover in this session, but what I wanted to be able to just give you a sense as to which are the most used social media platforms. So if you start to think about, oh my goodness, we've got so much to say, our audiences are based on all of these different platforms, where do we put our time? Where do we invest the majority of our effort? It's worth thinking about where people do spend their time. So number one is WhatsApp. So we can't necessarily influence that unless you're creating your own groups and communities on WhatsApp. That's something to think about. I'm a trustee for a local charity, and I'm part of some local initiatives, and we have our own community groups on WhatsApp. It's a really great way of being able to interact with each other. So if you're thinking about closed community, WhatsApp can be really good. So you've got two options there. You've got community and you've got groups. What's really interesting about the community setting is that you can either set it so that everybody can talk, or you can set it as broadcast. And that's quite interesting, because if you've got a group of people where you just need to tell them things, but you don't necessarily want to get into a conversation, and you just want to give them sort of, highlights of this has just happened, then a WhatsApp broadcast might be the place to do it. And that's where people spend the majority of their free time. Facebook is next. So again, in terms of, it's the second most used social media platform, followed by Instagram. So Facebook and Instagram are definitely things to look at if they're relevant for your audiences and your messages. And then we've got Facebook Messenger. So again, that's people engaging often with family and friends, or engaging with organisations. So I don't know how many of you have your own Facebook pages, and if you've got the ability for people to be able to get in touch with you. But if we see the fact that, it's the fourth most used form of social media, if you haven't got that, it's probably worth putting it in. If you haven't got it because you've been concerned that you haven't got time to fulfill it, it's worth looking at the AI functions that Facebook Messenger put in place as well. Because what you can do is you can immediately send a response that says, thank you for getting in touch. I'm sorry we're not online right now, but we'll be back to you. So you can immediately engage with people that way. You can also put sort of like FAQs in there as well. So actually, if what they want to ask is, are you running your open event next Thursday morning, or what time is your coffee morning, or something standard that people might have a question for, you can put those in as well. So that's something to think about too. Twitter is next, and then TikTok, as we said, that we're sort of moving up. And then we've got sort of text messaging, Snapchat, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Reddit, Skype. Gosh, Skype's still around. I haven't heard much about that for a while. So they get a little bit more specific as they go down. But with any platform, you've got to think about what's the right platform for us to be able to engage with the audience that's important to us. So yeah, your decisions have always got to be made around where that audience is. So last sort of slide to share with you in this section, if I remember rightly, is all about what are people's main reasons for using social media. And so this can be really useful as well for you to keep in mind when you're building your content. So not a surprise to see the main people that, you know, they're using social media is to keep in touch with their family and friends. But they also use it to fill their spare time. So for a lot of people, you know, they've maybe, you know, had a busy day, they come in, they have a cup of tea, and they just want to sort of dive into something to either be entertained or inspired or to, you know, utilize their time. So it's used to fill their spare time. Number 3 is reading news stories. So people use it to keep on top of current affairs. Number 4 is finding inspiration and things to do and buy. So that's a real hook perhaps for you guys as well. So, you know, if you're looking to, you know, encourage people to, you know, to volunteer and to experience volunteering for the first time, if you're looking for them to come to your event, actually it shows there is going to be an appetite for that, because nearly a quarter of people who go onto social media are looking for that. And then, you know, then it goes down. So next is seeing what's being talked about. People might want to find content online, and they might want to post about what they're doing. Now, when I saw this stat, I thought, my goodness, you know, the majority of people are going on social media to just engage with their family and friends. So for us as kind of community advocates and, you know, marketeers and, you know, organizations that are looking to tell a message or to sell a story to those audiences, we could look at that and feel, you know, a bit despondent because, you know, half of those people aren't there for us. But one of the brilliant benefits of social media is that actually it gives you the opportunity to put your message and your brand in front of people for the first time when they're not looking for it. So we've got to think about this in terms of having 2 audiences. We've got the existing audiences that already know about us and engage with us, but we've got that group of potential audiences and communities that actually you could benefit if they knew of you, or that, you know, you could make a difference in their life if they knew of you. And so although they're only going on to the social media platforms to engage with their family and friends, actually how can you utilize that so that they find you? And so that's something where the advertising can work really, really well. And that's where encouraging your current advocates, your current communities to bang the drum for you and to share them out at events or to do a shout out for your organization can be a really good way of them sort of bringing those audiences in for you. So let's see social media as a bit like a ripple effect. So, you know, you put your content out there, it's like throwing the stone in, and that creates the first ripple. The more people who like and share and comment on that, the more that ripple grows. And so for that person who just happens to hop on with a cup of tea after work to check in on their family and friends, if they see that family and friends have liked and shared on your comment, your post, then they're going to see it too. So think about that ripple effect and how, you know, what you're posting could potentially be seen more widely. So I'm conscious that I've thrown a lot at you there. Some of that will be known to you. Hopefully some of it's new, and hopefully it's got you thinking about what the top platform is for you. So you might know this already, but for those of you that are perhaps going to be looking to take this over or are looking to engage in social media for the first time, I'd like you just to sort of think on what I've told you there and think about what the top platform is for your cause. And then I'm going to ask you to tell us so that we can have a bit of a look at what everyone's thinking and feeling. So with that in mind, I'm going to launch our next poll. And I'm going to ask you, if I press the right button. Okay, so that poll's now live. So again, you'll need to go into that icon with the triangle, square, and the circle. And I'm going to ask you to pick your primary. So some of you might just be on one platform. Some of you are going to be on multiple platforms. But yeah, pick your primary. Let's look at, you know, together at which of those platforms is the right one for you. So we've got Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Snapchat, TikTok, and X. So that's not all of them, but they're the ones that I feel are probably the key ones that we need to be looking at. So let's get some of those votes in. So we've got 10 so far. It'd be good to see some more. Oh, sorry, 11 now so far. It'd be good to see some more on that as well. So thank you. 14. Okay, so let's have a look at those whole results then. So the question was, what's the right social media channel for you? And I asked you to pick your primary. So I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing all those. So racing ahead there is, losing faith in Twitter, Lynn. I don't think you're the only one. Okay, so Facebook racing ahead there with 12 votes, followed by LinkedIn with 3 and 1 vote for X. So yeah, thank you for that. So I'm interested to see that none of you have felt that Instagram, Snapchat or TikTok is your primary platform. So by that, I'm assuming Snapchat and TikTok are really good for that sort of like younger generation and for that really kind of creative content. So I'm assuming from this that that's not the area of support that you're wanting to get today, and you're not wanting to cascade through social media. So we're probably not talking about the younger demographics. So we're thinking about a slightly older demographic, and we're thinking about people who are already engaged in that Facebook community approach. So that's great. Thank you very much. So I can see that, Lynn was losing faith in X and Twitter, and Imogen as well, but it's gone drastically downhill. I think it's a real shame, isn't it? Because actually it was a platform that was quite distinct and different and was making a difference, and people really did like it. And I feel that it is going downhill, and interestingly, there's nothing really quite the same to replace it. So it is a real shame. What I would do is just a piece of advice for Twitter, for those of you who are active on it or have been active on it in the past but have stepped away or are stepping away. It might be useful to put a pinned post at the top that just makes that point. So we've done that at Keystone. So we used to be very active on Twitter, and we are much less active now because we've picked our primary platform as a consultancy, and our primary platform is LinkedIn, and we're putting much more effort in there. And because of the time it takes, we decided to just keep a secondary eye on Twitter, but not to be active on it. But for anyone who lands on our profile, I still want them to feel welcomed, and I still want them to know that we are engaged. And so we've put a holding post on there. It says something like, thanks so much for stopping by. We're not active on here right now, but you can go onto our website and find out more, or you can find us elsewhere. And what we'll do is we'll update that pinned post regularly, so it's fresh and it's new, but it means that we're not having to be in it all the time. So that might be a tip there for you all as well. Okay, all right, no, that's great. Now, what I would say at this point is perhaps in the chat, because so many of you have chosen Facebook, I wonder whether anyone is happy to just give me a thumbs up in the chat if you are, to tell me why. I probably can't ask all 12 of you why, but is there anyone that would be open to sharing why Facebook? So we've got Nico Dutch 24. So you're seeing Facebook as the best for young families for engagement and sharing. Would you be happy to sort of turn your microphone off and expand on that, just so that we can all learn from you?
I'll try. I hope you can hear me, Hayley. Great. It's Nick Dixon from BFVR.
Yeah,
I jump on.
Oh, sorry.
on my other devices, I couldn't get the microphone to work on my tablet, so yeah. I'm here in multiple formats. No, I'm really happy to share. We're obviously trying to engage with audiences that aren't already engaged in heritage activities, because that's part of the remit for our funding. So we had a long look at what networks, what social media apps we should be using. Facebook was one that we sort of carried on from a previous, and I think your demographics show it. We find that really good for people, for young families, for sort of friends and families sharing what we're putting out there. And it's a visual thing. You can put text on there as well. You can have links, all the other stuff, doing other things. But we found that as quite a good way of finding new audiences. Twitter, we do put stuff on Twitter. And I've always been slightly dubious that we're sort of talking to ourselves. We've got, a lot of our partners are on Twitter, and we share stuff and we like stuff. And we engage with people who kind of are interested and have kind of found us because they're interested in the sort of things we're doing. But that's not perhaps that new audience, that hard to reach audience that we're trying to engage with. And that's about connecting people to landscape and heritage that aren't already involved in it. So again, come back to Facebook as seemed to be good for that.
Yes, yeah, no, absolutely. Oh, thanks for sharing that, Nick. Can I ask, Nick, have you had any experience of Facebook ads in your outreach for family?
Yes, and we've done them very kind of occasionally, with the exception of the last few weeks where we start doing a few more, and that's about trying to get bums on seats for events where we've got a specific number of places on an event that is being paid for by lottery funding, and we are pretty much automatically, I think, sending that out. It is linked to Instagram, and I think you can do Messenger as well through it. We sort of do a but we kind of advert for that. We tend to spend about also pounds. I think the recommendation is to do about £10 per event, and it's to people in our geographic area rather than expressed an interest. Because again, we're trying to reach new people rather than sort of the usual audience that's already engaged in heritage activities.
Yes, yeah, that's great. Thank you for that, Nick. So I think Facebook advertising can be a really great way of reaching those new audiences, as Nick was saying there. And as I mentioned earlier, it can be quite cost effective. One of the other things that's worth looking at for those of you that are looking at maybe Facebook ads or running events is actually to set up a Facebook event directly. So one of the tenders that we're running at the moment is for Cambridgeshire County Council, and it's a heritage lottery funded arts programme that's bringing high quality, low cost events into Cambridgeshire, into the libraries. And there's about 50 events that are running this season. And our advice to the team, so we're the comms lead for, was to say, you know what, we want to create an individual event for every event on Facebook. Now it's quite a labour intensive thing to do. For one event, it doesn't take very long. For 50, it takes a little bit longer. But that point that sort of Nick was saying about how advertising can help you reach new audiences, if it's an audience that you need to try and find for an event to get those bums on seats and you're looking for new audiences, if you create an event on Facebook, what that also does is it invites people to either express their interest or to confirm they're going. And as soon as they click on one of those buttons, that ripple effect that I mentioned, it shows all of their followers that, Joe Blogs is attending this event. And by nature, we're curious, aren't we? And so often, the algorithm in Facebook will show us what our friends and family are doing. And, if I saw one of my friends has signed up to an event and I think, well, that's interesting, I might go and have a look at that as well. So you can use advertising to get your new audiences, but actually that new audience can then be responsible organically for bringing somebody else in to that event as well. And so it can be a very powerful model. So yeah, thank you for that. Just looking in the chat, Imogen has made a really good point about Facebook groups, and this is something that I was going to mention later as well. So Imogen, I don't know, I know you had trouble hearing. I don't know, you've got that different speaker. I don't know if you're going to have trouble with your microphone, and if you can speak, would you be happy to talk about your experience of posting in community groups, because I think that's worth bringing up as well.
Yes, I think that is one of the strengths of it, that you've got massive numbers of little village or town connected communities. And I mean, Thetford's got about 15 different groups, for example. And basically you put a post on your own profile, and then you can share it quickly in other groups. And if you need to go back to the original post, you can change it, and then it reshares the same thing, if you know what I mean. So it's a bit time consuming to go to lots of groups, but you do get a lot of responses. Whether it be people saying, oh yeah, that event sounds interesting, and then signing up, because of course you could put in the link to it, or the other thing is researching local history, and perhaps more sometimes in the community groups, sometimes in the history community groups, and you get responses from people, especially if you share a photo or something and say, do you remember this, or something like that. So I think that's why it's powerful, is that reach into the community groups you were talking about earlier. People join those community groups perhaps just to link up with their neighbours and their friends and so on. And actually the other thing, as well as the localized ones, is the specialist interest. So in my case, it would be either local history groups or swimming groups. So again, people of like mind and like common interest. If you can connect with that common interest, I think that can be very powerful. So yeah, time consuming. I've never paid for it, but it's more time than money.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that, Imogen, because I think, and I'll come to you actually next, Nick. Thank you for sharing that, because that is very, very beneficial, and it's great to see that it's working for you. And actually, that's something that we do a lot as well. And so it can work for ongoing activity where you're wanting to raise awareness of your organisation or initiative over a long period, or it can just work for a campaign. And so if you were doing something new, maybe to a brand new audience, or it's a brand new message, as part of your campaign planning, it's probably worth looking at where are those local groups and sort of online directories where we could potentially place our content. Sometimes you're able to go in and do that yourself, like Imogen was saying, and sometimes it has to be done by sort of like an administrator or a moderator. And so that's where you can potentially, give content over to somebody else to post on your behalf as well. But it definitely puts your message in the place where your audiences are already congregating. And as Imogen said as well, actually, if you're going into that special interest environment, it's likely to be that what you're saying to them is going to be of interest. And in life, generally, we don't know what we don't know, do we? And so sometimes we have got to place ourselves, in new environments to be able to get those messages across. So yeah, thanks so much for sharing, Imogen. So Nick, you've raised your hand. Is there something you wanted to say about groups?
Well, I absolutely want to agree with what Imogen said. Those groups are really important, and our product team now is really good at actually getting our stuff into those groups. I just wonder, this is a question for you actually, Hayley, is there a way that, because we spent researching those groups and finding where those groups were, and we were doing kind of interest groups as well as kind of geographic groups, so village chat and things like that for the scheme area. I'm just wondering, is there an index of groups? Is there somewhere we can find a list to make it easier to find these groups, or do we just have to search with keywords?
No, unfortunately not. So it's a question of having to curate them and then sort of save them and sort of reuse them. I mean, collectively, as a partnership, thinking about the Brecks and so on, maybe there's an opportunity that you could create a shared group that you could all have access to acknowledge what's available in a certain area. But it does tend to come down to that kind of online search. We've never been able to find a way of finding all the content in one place, because they come and go as well, and some are active and some are dormant. So it's also about making sure you find the ones that are active, because groups can come and go, and sort of anyone can set up a group and then often it just sort of falls away. So no, unfortunately not. It's a little bit of sort of market research, but it's actually a really enjoyable exercise. We find my project opposite team does it and they love it, because it's that sense of, we've got this blank piece of paper, we've got this new client, this new campaign, this new message, and a blank sheet of paper. Where are all the places we can put it? But yes, unfortunately not. But it's always worth asking your partnership network. So again, if we think about, you always need to place your message in the place where your audience already is. It's also thinking about who already has access to that audience, and you can ask them. So it's perhaps asking partners that are involved in the same space or with the same audiences, well, where do you go as well? And once you've got it, and you can then reuse it to your heart's content. But no, unfortunately, it's a little bit of work. But hopefully, once you've done it, you can repurpose it. Yeah. Okay, lovely. Thank you, and great to see some chat there as well. So about Thetford have talked about your largest audience on Facebook, which is fantastic, and how great that people are being able to sort of find you from all over and engage with what you do. And I think it's also really important to just look at those audiences and to make sure that they are engaged. So if you've got a high number of followers but you're not getting the likes and the comments and the shares, you've got to think about how you can better engage with those audiences, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So at this point, I'm just going to move on. We will have a break shortly, but I just want to talk a little bit more about those audiences. So really understanding your audience. So we've had Nick and Imogen already talk about understanding their audiences and where they've gone to be able to engage with them. And so if we think about this today, me taking you on a journey, what we've done is we thought about, is social media right for us? What are the challenges and the benefits? what's the right platform, and then the next stage really is about understanding your audience. And so for those of you who've already got that understanding, hopefully this is just a refresh for you, but actually for those that are perhaps thinking about having to engage with a new audience for the first time, this might give you some top tips. And it doesn't just relate to social media, it relates to sort of wider marketing, but it's absolutely essential that when you're producing anything for social media, you've got to think about that personal people that you're wanting to engage in. And so from a marketing perspective, we talk about that as an audience persona. And so I've just given you a definition of what that is there. So it's the visualization and the profile of a person that represents your ideal audience. So I'd be interested to hear in the chat if anybody has done some work on audience personas, because I might ask you to share your views in a moment. So do pop into the chat if that's something that you would be able to talk about. But I'm just going to give you some sort of advice and guidance as to how you can create that audience persona. And so you've got to, and the reason we say about thinking about this as a person is it helps to bring it to life. So let's say, for example, you wanted to recruit some new volunteers, then you could think about an amazing volunteer that you've got at the moment. So, you know, let's say it's a man called Bob, and Bob is a certain age, and Bob has a certain skill set, and Bob does these brilliant things for you as a volunteer, and you want to find more Bobs. You should make Bob your audience persona, and you know, to sort of think about exactly who Bob is, you know, what drives him, what his fears and ambitions are, and then you can use that to create a persona, and then you can start to create content that will engage with other people just like Bob. So if you haven't done this, it can be a really powerful exercise, and I've encouraged you to do it. And let's go through some of those top tips that can help you. So think about sort of, yeah, who they are, their demographics, sort of what age are they, you know, where do they live, what's their background, in terms of their behaviours, you know, what are their interest areas, you know, how do they spend their time, what's their history and so on, and things like their goals. So, you know, what are their drivers? Why do they want to do this? So if it's a volunteer, you know, is it their goal that they, you know, they want to experience something new? Is it that they want to give their time back? You know, if you can understand their goals, you can drive into that through your social media content. But what are their challenges? So what are the things that might make it a barrier for them to engage with you, and yeah, those interest areas and more. The more you can understand that persona, the more you can flesh out, you know, Bob and all the other audiences that you've got, the more specific you can be in your social media marketing, and the more then that will resonate with that person. So just to dive into this in a little bit more detail, and one of the things that I have got to send to you afterwards, I don't know whether any of you are familiar with the Media Trust, which is a charitable organisation that was set up a number of years ago now to support the charity space with sort of tools to help them promote themselves. They have a really great audience persona sort of template, which I'm going to send to you after this session, because it might be that's relevant for some of you. So it puts all these things into boxes. But in essence, what you need to think about is, you know, a specific person. So either somebody that is brilliant at helping you right now and you want to find more like them, or think about, you know, so Nick was talking earlier about engaging with young families. So, you know, Nick, for your audience persona, you might say, well, you know, who is our lead for that? You know, is it the mum? Is it the dad? Is it the child? And then you can put the quick stats together. So what age are they? What gender? Social media position is, for instance, you know, are they active on the platform? Are they in that age band? Are they in that interest area? So what their goals are. So what do they want to achieve in life? So for a family, it might be around looking for things to do, or it might be to inspire their children in something new. So think about what the goals of that individual audience persona might be, and what their challenges are, what difficulties they might face. So actually they might be limited with the amount of time they've got. They might be limited with the amount of disposable income they've got. They might have a child that you know, doesn't work well in big groups, and so they need to find something that's going to be you know, targeted and very small, for instance. You know, what their values are, what drives them generally in life. You know, are they somebody who wants to, you know, are they, you know, I don't know, like a go-getter and a thrill seeker that every day wants to be doing something different, or, you know, are their values around, you know, bringing up their children in an environment which, you know, deliver certain experiences to them and so on. So think about all those values. You know, are these people, you know, quite you know, value led in terms of wanting to give back and so on, but what their fears are as well, what concerns them. So what are they worried about, you know, and how can you play into that too. So what I'd encourage you to think about is, who do you already know in your current audience who fits into your A persona? So I'd like you to think about your own Bob. So it could be, you know, it could be a volunteer, it could be, you know, a local family, it could be somebody who you want to buy your product or service. You might want to do a persona for your ideal candidate. You know, you perhaps need to build a team. So I know you can't see this now, but I just wanted to show you this is what it will look like. And so it will just, you can print it out and it will take you through all of those things. And it can be quite a helpful exercise. It's something you can do as an individual. It's something you could ask your teams to do separately, or it's something you can do collectively, but it can be really powerful. And my prediction will be that you have more than one persona, but it really helps if you can put yourself into the mindset of the people you're looking to engage in. So watch out for that coming through. So once you've got that sense of who your persona is, so that ideal audience that you want to engage with, I'd like you to think about, are they already following you online? So there was a message earlier that talked about, you know, the greatest number of your followers is on Facebook, which is excellent. Have you guys all benchmarked what your current follower numbers are? And do you track that regularly? So once you know who that ideal audience are, you know, if you've got a sense as to how many of them there are in your local community, how many are following you? So do you need to think about getting new follower numbers, or are those follower numbers detracting? So we talked earlier about, you know, people are falling away from Twitter. Actually, people stop liking things all the time on Facebook, or stop following profiles all the time on Instagram. So it's really important that you measure to make sure that you're not going backwards in that. You also need to think about, are you actively promoting your social media channels elsewhere? Because although they work beautifully in their own environment to engage with people, actually, you know, who's engaging with you elsewhere that doesn't know about your social media? So, you know, it's likely that you'll have your links on your website, but when you go to events, for instance, you know, do you encourage people to follow you on social media? You know, is it on the bottom of your email footers so that people can see it? If you're at events, you know, do you stand up at the beginning or the end and thank everybody and say, please follow us on social media? So think about ways you can actively bolster your channel numbers elsewhere, because the more followers you get, the more chance you've got people seeing your content, which is obvious, but the more they like and engage with that content, the more their followers will see it as well. And we find this working really well in our work with B2Bs for LinkedIn. So we do a specific LinkedIn training course for organisations that want to get their staff to engage in LinkedIn. And it's really, really, really powerful that once people start following the company page and they can see the part they play in sharing the content, how much that bolsters the reach. So think about where you're actively promoting your social media channels internally and externally. And then once you've done that, you can think about, can you advertise to reach your wider persona group? So if you find there's you've got a new audience type that you need to engage with, you know, let's benchmark your current follower numbers and think about, you know, are you promoting your social media to that audience group? And if you're or not, and there's a barrier or a limit in how many people are seeing it, that might be an opportunity to look to advertise. But you've got to have that hook. You've got to have something of value to advertise against. So it can't just be a come and follow us on social media. You've got to show them what the value in that is. So, you know, the hook might be an event. The hook might be some top tips. The hook might be, you know what, we're on a mission to do X, Y, and Z. If that's you, come and join us. So advertising can work really well to get people in. In years gone by, you'd see a lot of competitions on things like Facebook. I don't know whether any of you have done sort of competitions that you run through social media as well. We've run them recently for clients. They can be really powerful, and I'll talk to you about how they can work on social media. But there are some really stringent rules around competitions on social media, so you can't do it just to boost your visitor numbers. So years ago, there used to be sort of like the tag and follow competitions that people would do on Facebook or other social media. So they'd say, we're running a competition to win X, Y, and Z. Follow us and tag somebody to follow us, and we'll put you in our draw. And that's now not acceptable through the competition rules. It's seen as a way of, you're not using social media in the right way. It's not adding value. It's not community spirited. It's just trying to get numbers. And so that's something that you're not able to do anymore through the terms and conditions. But what you can do is you can run competitions in another way, as a way of secondary getting social media followers. So for a couple of our clients in recent years, we've run photography competitions. So one was a visitor economy campaign for a district council. So we asked people to share their pictures of the district, what you love about the green spaces and the waterways and the high streets, etc. And in order to be able to apply to be part of the competition, they had to post their image on social media, and they had to tag us in with the hashtag so that we could see, and then we were able to enter them into the competition that way. So photography competitions can be a really good way of doing it. So it can work for lots of things. So we've done it for a visitor economy campaign. We've also done one for a wildlife initiative as well, so encouraging amateur photographers and professional photographers to be able to submit their photos for a competition. For that, they sent them in to us by email, not on social media, but we said that we would be sharing the results on social media, and we would be sharing the winners on social media as well. So it was a way of drawing greater attention to the social media platforms. So it's something to think about. Another way of boosting your follower numbers is to think about who already has access to the group you wish to engage with. So Imogen has already talked to us about those Facebook groups, which are a great way of being able to dive straight into that audience in a place where they're already congregating. It's also worth having a look at online directories, which could link in maybe to your social media activity as well. So for instance, in St Neots, we have an online directory called stneots.directory, I think, and it's for residents to be able to go in and to be able to engage in what's going on in the local community. So groups they can join, events they can be part of, etc. And a lot of the time that's actually posting people to Facebook accounts and Facebook groups as well. So have a look at those online directories. So Nick, we were talking earlier about there's no quick win on the Facebook groups. It's the same with the online directories, I suppose, as well. But it is worth having a look at those too, because they're a way that you can engage in those audiences. And then the other one is wider partners. So we do a lot of stakeholder engagement work, and it can be a really powerful way of being able to strengthen relationships, but it can be a really great way of bringing people to your social media platform as well. So I'd ask you to think about who out there in your wider stakeholder group has an active social media profile that you can kind of piggyback on. And so by that, it's, can they share your content for them? So have you got a great image? Have you got a great blog? Have you got a great event coming up that you would like them to be able to promote for you? And if they do that, you would want them to tag you in, and so that you could see that they talked about you. And that's a way of bringing greater attention to your social media platforms as well. So yeah, really important to understand who your ideal audience is, to put a persona together for them, and then to think about, are they connected with you online? And if not, how you can look to bolster those numbers. But what's really important about understanding why you're on social media is you've got to understand the why. So what's your goal? And so what I want to talk to you about here is that sense of understanding what your objective is against your goal. So I think the majority of people told me earlier that your business objective was to boost that brand awareness. And so if you're wanting to do that, you need to think about your social media goal being awareness as well. And so by that, if you want to grow the brand, that means you want more people to see your content on social media. So the metric you need to be looking at is your followers. So how many followers have you got? How many shares have you got? How many times has that content been seen online? Some of you told me you wanted to look at building community. So for you're wanting to turn what we would call your customers into your advocates. So we want you to, for people to know about you, to connect with you and feel that they're part of a community. So your social media goal with that group of people is engagement. So actually you want to be thinking about, well, how much of our audience are commenting, are liking, are mentioning us? So if it's around that building a community, you want to check that that's actually happening. I think one or two of you mentioned that you are wanting to drive leads and sales. So for you, the terminology to think about is conversions. So how is social media converting that person in that place and moving them over into something else where they start to buy from you? So you want to be looking at things like web clicks, email sign-ups, etc. So your content on social media might be more about sign up here to get this, or look onto our website for that, and you would be classing that as really good quality conversions. What we also find is organisations sometimes want to improve customer retention. So let's say, for instance, you've got an existing, and by customers, I mean that in the widest form. So this might be clients, this might be volunteers. You might want to improve retention. So for instance, you might have, a package of activity that you deliver quite often, and you want people to keep coming back to it. So the sorts of things that are really important for you is you want to be engaging with those people, and for them to be telling others about how great you are. So for that, you're looking at things like testimonials. You're wanting them to shout about you on social media. You want to be thinking about, how active are we at engaging with that group and responding with that group online. So if you have your own group, so let's say, for instance, you have a volunteer WhatsApp community, or you have a volunteer Facebook group, you want to make sure that you're engaging quite often in there as well. So it's really important to be thinking about that objective. So when you told me earlier, I want to boost brand awareness, or I want to direct traffic to my website, etc., apply that to your social media goal and what metrics you need to measure. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about metrics later. And then what I also wanted to just give you a sort of a visual sense of here is in marketing, we often talk about the marketing funnel. I've also talked about it as a bucket. I've also talked about it as a sausage machine. So take whichever one of those analogies that you like. But if we think about your audiences, we're trying to move them along. So Nick talked earlier about being on Facebook and using ads to raise awareness to a particular audience so that they came along to an event. And so what we're doing is we're moving that audience through a number of different steps. And no matter who that audience is, you're moving them down a number of steps, be it people you want to engage in events, be it your volunteers, being it a brand new special interest group. We're wanting to move them along. And so it's important to think about that in your social media construction as well. So actually, they need to know about you first of all. So that's the brand awareness piece. And I know lots of you are thinking about that as your primary need at the moment. But that's not enough. We need them to know about you and that brand awareness. And then we need them to be interested and engaged. And I'm going to talk to you about how we can do that in a little while. But then from there, that's not enough either. So we've got their interest and they're engaged. So they're interested in your event, Nick, and they're engaged in it and so on. But then we need them to actually consider this to the point where they say, you know what, I'm going to take action. And so they're the things that we're looking to do with social media. So there's generally always going to be a call to action in your media content, and we're going to talk about that in a little while as well. But I just think about that. So when you're producing your social media content, or you're thinking about, right, what campaign are we going to launch this month and why, think about it as taking people down those stages. And when I talk about this as a sausage machine, I talk about, at the top end, we're putting the meat in the sausage grinder. That's our brand awareness. And at the end, when they take action, that's the sausages coming out again. So each step has a benefit, but ultimately we're taking people down the funnel. So if you ever hear about marketing funnel, if you hear about bucket, if you hear about, that kind of like conversion and action, any of those terms, it's all about taking people through. So something else to think about. Okay, so at this point, I would like to sort of test the water with another poll. So let me come into the poll status so that I can run that. And we're moving on slightly with the content. And I just want to get a sense as to how often you use social media. So I've asked you to tell me, why you use it and what your primary platform is. But now I'd like to understand how often, because this will help us think about where we take the content from here. So let me just launch this poll. So how often do you use social media to promote your activity or raise awareness of your work? So this isn't how often you use it personally. This is in the guise of, for your organisation or your initiative, how often are you engaging in social media? So we've got regularly, to which I'm classing as once a week or more, sometimes, which is at least twice a month, hardly ever, or no, never. So we've got 11 votes so far. So let's see if we can get a few more votes, and then we can have a look at this. And that's great. Thank you very much. So at the moment, we can see the majority of you are posting regularly, sort of once a week or more. but then we have a number of you that are posting at other levels as well. So we're going to have a talk about this in a minute. So do put anything in the chat in terms of how you feel about this, in terms of how often you're posting, and then we'll have a look at this content in a little bit more detail before we break for a 15-minute session. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so we've got 19 votes. So I'm going to close the poll and then we're going to have a look at those. So pretty much half of you are engaging regularly, so once a week or more, but 25% of you are hardly ever or quite sporadic in that. So from there, I'm hearing, you know, you're probably more reactive with your social media, so you're putting things on there when you have to, or when you need to, or when something comes up, or when you feel you've got something really pertinent and important to say. Those of you that are perhaps doing it more regularly are maybe into the flow and the pace of it, or maybe you've got more resource to be able to do that. But we do have someone there who's the no never. Now, I can't see who that person is, but I really, really hope at the end of this session that you feel you've got some tools to be able to go away and deliver on the social media output if it's relevant for your organisation. So thank you for that. Now, I think I just heard a little noise, which might mean that someone's put something in the chat. Okay, so Sandra, so you've got concerns over privacy and the blowback. So is that in terms of how are you the person not using social media at the moment? Are you happy to share your thoughts?
That's yes, that's correct. The group as a whole don't feel comfortable on social media.
Okay.
I mean, we're I guess mostly retired, and everybody has concerns about privacy and doesn't see why the whole world has to live their life online. And also there's such a lot of really nasty stuff on there.
Yeah. There can be, can't there, Sandra? You're right. And actually, you know, you might find your group. I mean, could you just let me know what your group is, Sandra? You have to share.
Yeah, it's the River Mel Restoration Group. We've got a group that's been running about 15 years for river restoration in Meldrith and Melbourne in South Cambridgeshire.
Okay. So as a group, how do you communicate with each other?
Email.
Okay. So something you might. Sorry, Sandra.
So I was going to say, and we advertise, I guess, for new members in the local, you know, even local parish magazine. Yeah.
And you meet face to face, I guess, as well, do you? As a group?
We have a working party every month, every 6 weeks.
Okay.
And I mean, it's quite a cohesive group. I mean, they've been working together for a long time.
Fantastic.
But we're concerned about keeping the group going, getting more people in. But younger people just don't seem to have the time. They're busy doing, you know, looking after children and et cetera.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But it sounds like you've got a really strong group and a committed group of people, which is excellent. And those sort of forms are working really well for you. As a group, you might be interested in looking at something like WhatsApp, you know, for you just as a group. So your social media doesn't have to always be about broadcasting outwardly. It can be just, you know, for all of you as an organisation as well. So that might be something that's worth looking at. And then maybe, you know, if anything kind of whets your appetite today, one of the ways to maybe to look at maybe dipping your toe in would be to think about, okay, are there sort of Facebook groups in our local community that we can just be in personally, just to sort of start to get a feel for who else is maybe talking about these things in our local area.
Yep.
So that might be a way of doing it. It doesn't have to be broadcasting kind of what you do necessarily. But I think the parish magazines are also great. And although I'm here to talk about social media, there are so many other ways of being able to engage with audiences, aren't there? So if it's not right for you, that's, you know, absolutely okay, Sandra.
Is there a way that we can have a Facebook group and not be identified as the person posting?
So yes, you can. So you can have a private Facebook group where people have to invite to join. So you can moderate who comes in, and then you are able to post as anonymous members as well. So you can do that too. So again, so there's different levels of social media. So you can have it that's just for, you know, your working group. You can have it just for, you know, it can be a closed forum or it can be an open forum. So yeah, there's different ways of being able to do it, Sandra. Yeah.
I mean, we would like an open forum, but I don't want people to then be able necessarily trace that post back to me or one of the other members, and then have a lot of hassle with people not agreeing with what we've said, etc., etc.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, it's something to have a think about. That might be a way of sort of dipping your toe in, and there's perhaps other people on the group that'd be able to offer you some advice and sort of insights on that in terms of how they've maybe made their first forays into social media before, as well. So yeah, no, wish you all the best with that, Sandra. It's certainly
Okay.
to think about. That's great. Thank you. Okay, that's great. So thank you for sharing on that, Sandra. So the majority of you are posting regularly. Does anyone, just before we break, does anyone want to just pop into the chat that they'd be happy to speak about their experiences? That do you do it happily, or do you do it under duress? We talked in the first half, all about, thinking about strategically, what's the best platform, some of the things to think about when you're working in the platforms, and then talking about your all important audience. And so now what I'd like to talk about is the development of content, because of course there is no interaction on social media unless you've actually got content. And by content, I mean words, I mean images, and I mean videos as well. And to help you think about how best to create and define your content, I've got some examples. And one of the polls you talked about, where we looked at Facebook being sort of like the predominant place that you guys interact in. And so a lot of what we're talking about here is all around sort of construction of those Facebook posts. So that will be really helpful, I think, for you as well. So let's crack on. So what do you think about first when you're thinking about your social media content? And most of you are posting regularly, so you're perhaps quite confident in your social media production, and you've got lots of regular content out there. You need to think about what type of content you're creating. And what I've got here is just a couple of slides to show you what the top types of social media content are that drive engagement. And by engagement, we mean people stopping and engaging with your post by liking it, commenting on it, following or sharing. And without engagement, actually your social media isn't making an impact. So there are definitely some things that you can do through your content to make it more engaging. So the first three are there. So think about, from your perspective, is the content you're sharing, is it about entertainment, inspiration, education, conversation, connection, and promotion? I'm not quite sure why this is all demonstrated with unicorns, but I really like the image, and so I've left it in. So yeah, maybe it's just a form of engagement. Perhaps someone's run a poll and unicorns are very engaging. I don't know, but yeah, have a think about what type of content it is that you're currently using, and you'll get these slides. Have a look at the examples that are on the slides, because there might be a type of content which has been proven to drive engagement that you're not doing at the moment, and it might be something that you can look to do. So as an example, a lot of organisations will think about, actually, we just need to broadcast our message kind of out all the time. The things we've got to say, we've just got to say them, and they don't think about ways of building the brand in other ways. So things like behind the scenes can work really well. So if you have got an event, actually share the behind the scenes of the workshop with the team developing the event and so on. So it doesn't always have to be around the priority content piece that you want to shout about. Create some sort of softness around your pieces and change the types of content that you produce to increase that engagement. So have a look at those. This might be too small for you to look at, but this is another sort of technique in terms of how to build your content. So first of all, think about what type of content is it? Is it engaging? Is it inspirational? Is it educational, etc.? And then from there, there's some examples of types of content you can then build that fall into those themes. And so some of you will be doing this already. So I imagine a lot of you share articles already. You might, put Q&As in there. You might offer sort of freebies or, testimonials, etc. But it's always a really good idea to look at, the whole list of ingredients that are open to you from a content perspective, and to think about if there's something new you could be doing that you're not doing already. And for those of you who are a little bit more sporadic in your social media, if it's because you don't know what to say, and that can be really tough if you think, gosh, we've not said anything for a while, but what are we going to say? Some of the ideas that are on these slides might inspire you to be able to create something. And if creating your own content feels like a step too far, or you're looking to kind of bolster the amount of social media activity you're doing without having to write more content, this is when you've got the opportunity to repost and share what other people are doing. So those partners that we talked about earlier, those stakeholders and so on, sometimes a way of demonstrating your brand awareness is by showing your support to others. And so that can be a really great way of, you know, you're still then sending content out, it just happens to be the resharing of someone else's content. So have a look at those things there as well. So I'd like you to start thinking about what types of content you can share. So just in your own minds, think about, for those of you who are posting regularly, does it all fall into the same theme, or is there a mix of content that you're sharing? So is it always saying the same thing? Is it always showing the same thing? Or have you got different messages that you can share? I'd also like you to think sort of in your own time around, by types of content, you know, could we be saying something with a video that we're currently just saying in words? Video is the most engaging form of content on social media, but it's something that we can feel quite nervous about. But actually, people don't read reams and reams of content. So is a talking head with the, you know, project leader, hi, I'm just taking 2 minutes to tell you about this. Is that a more effective way of sharing content? So have a think about that. And then I'd like to just draw your attention to what we call like the anatomy of the perfect social media post. And so the post that we're seeing there is for something like on LinkedIn or Facebook. So I'm really pleased to see lots of you are interacting on Facebook, so we can have a look at each of these. So, you know, once you've decided what it is you're going to talk about, you know what you want to say. This is helping to demonstrate how you need to say it, how you need to present it in a way that's likely to get the best level of engagement. And you can see here, there's not a massive amount of information. So we need to always make sure that our content is quite scannable at that top piece. So we always want to make sure that we've got, you know, less is more in terms of content. People don't read lots. So, you know, working with a headline and a key headline can work really, really well. You know, you've got the ability to add the hashtags that I talked about earlier. We're seeing more and more now around people using emojis and special characters. So depending on your message, that can be quite, you know, quite useful to add in. But we do also need to think about accessibility as well. And so for people who are using sort of readers and things, it might be useful to think about, actually, emojis are perhaps not right for your audience because they're not going to be able to transcribe them as such. But think about that could be quite useful. And what emojis can do as well is it draws attention. So when people see lots of text, if they can't scan it, you know, it's hard work, isn't it? And emojis we're seeing now in social media being used as things like bullet points, or being used at the beginning and the end of a sentence to draw attention to that sentence. So it's almost like a design tool within social media. So it's worth thinking about that. We'd also encourage you to think about line breaks, so you can see those there as well. So if you've got a lot to say, space it out. This is done horrendously by some people on LinkedIn, where they have one sentence and then they space it, and another sentence and then a space, and so on, because they want people to click and read everything. So don't do it too far. But where you've got content, just think about, is there space around this content? Is it easy enough for people to read and capture the essence straight away? Now, there's 3 things we always say are really important in a social media post. And this is where Instagram doesn't work. It doesn't let us do one of the 3 in the way that we would like to. It's really important to always have a graphic on there, so an image. Now, even if you haven't got an image that relates to the content that you're posting, there are some brilliant, and this is one of your tools to think about, there's some brilliant tools out there which enable you to download usage rights free imagery that you can use. So the ones that we use quite a lot here at Keystone are one called Pexels, which is P-E-X-E-L-S, and the other one is Unsplash. And in essence, it's a search engine for free images that you can use, and you can type in what image you're looking for and it will show you the ones that you can use for free. So always make sure you've got an image, and as I say, even if you haven't got an image that relates specifically to what you're promoting, there will be an image that you can find. So number 1 thing we want to have, once you've got your text, make sure there's an image. We always want to make sure there's some sort of mention on there as well, because that gets it seen more widely. So do you want to mention a partner that it's in conjunction with? Do you want to mention the parish council, who's been really supportive of that project before? So always make sure you've got a mention in there as well, because that means that it gets seen more widely. So have a visual. have a mention, and the other thing is call to action. So we're going to talk about call to action in a minute, but actually basically that means what is it that you want the people to do, and then take them somewhere. So it might be that call to action to visit your website for those that want to get more people onto the website. The call to action might be to go to Eventbrite to sign up to an event, or the call to action might be something else. But it's really important to have, if you can, all of those things in there, because then your social media post is working to greatest effect for you. You're taking time to post it, you're taking time to think about what to say. Make sure you construct it in the very best way, because then it's more likely to be activated. So there are all those things. So a strong image, strong copy laid out in a way that makes it easy for people to look at, that strong call to action. Think about those mentions, hashtags as well, and then yeah, you've got the anatomy of the perfect post. This is another example of how one might look as well, so that we can see this without all my arrows around it. So this is a B2B organization, but it's got some of those things in that we've talked about. So it's really short and succinct in terms of the content. It's using those emojis. So like, for instance, like the arrow pointing, that becomes the call to action. And it's got all of those hashtags in there as well, and the engaging image. So if I was to present this to you in another way, without the image, without any of the emojis, with loads of text, it would make it really, really hard. And I don't know if you can spot on there that trackable URL. So it's a bit.ly URL. Now, what you've got the ability to do with your social media posts is that you can track the URLs. So that means, Facebook will tell you how many people have clicked, absolutely. But if you want to know how many people keep going back to that page, perhaps go back to it again and again, if you can track your URL, that can give you a more accurate approach to knowing how many people have visited your content elsewhere. So I've talked quite a bit about engagement, and it's all about producing content that's going to engage. And so just to sort of break down this definition, I guess, really, and for you to think about exactly what engagement means. And so we would define it as any interaction a fan has with your social media content that shows they're interested in your post and may want to support your cause. So any interaction, so them stopping and looking at it without doing anything, we can't prove they're engaged. They might be, but we can't prove. But by this, it's around, how many likes, how many comments, how many reposts or shares, and how many calls to action are taken, and that gives you your engagement. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the measurement in a short while, and all of the social media platforms give you a sense of your engagement through their stats, and that's a really useful thing to look at. We also talked earlier about how Twitter engagement is going down, so actually we're finding on Twitter less people are engaging in posts, but yeah, engagement is all around how they are interacting with your social media activity. And so to monitor and increase engagement, it's all about people stopping, reading, clicking, sharing and commenting. So when you're producing your content, that's what you're doing it for, is it's about getting that engagement. And you've got to get that engagement first before they will then do anything. So again, it's all these stepping stones. So some examples here and ways that you can elevate your social media engagement. So I'm conscious that sometimes there's quite a few challenges involved. You've got to think about, what are we going to say? And then you've got to think, how are we going to construct it in a way that's going to make it engaging? And so these are just some other examples that might be helpful for you as well. So just think about, when you're producing something, is this the best it can be? Is this going to be something that makes people take action? And so there's some examples there of how that can work. Humour can be really interesting. It doesn't work for every organisation, and sometimes organisations, sort of national bodies, can get into hot water if they're seen to be too flippant about things. So humour doesn't always work. But actually, I would always just say be human. You're talking to people like you, yeah, be human, and be really mindful of things like AI. So we're hearing a lot about ChatGPT at the moment, aren't we? And it can be brilliant as a way of curating ideas and editing content and so on. But we are humans, and we're more likely to get people to engage in our content if we think about it that way. So I talked about calls to action. So just to talk about what those are in more detail. So you might hear them called CTAs. These are used in all aspects of marketing and absolutely in social media. So ultimately, it's not just enough to put a post out there. You want people to do something with that post usually. And so I've just got some examples there, depending on you want your audience to do, these might be some of the content pieces and language you could use to get them to take that action. So these might be things to think about. You know, are you using these terms already? Are these terms you could start to use in your social media? You know, are there others that you've seen worked really well? So rather than just posting, you know, a web address and assuming they'll know what to do, that piece around don't miss out, or take a look, or read more, just helps to direct them through. So yeah, when you think about how to lead your engagement, think about creating those calls to action. It's also really important that you think about the impression that you make, because as soon as you've posted that, it's out there. So some of you who work for larger organizations will have maybe brand guidelines that you need to stick within. But for some of you, this will just be, you know, this might be your job. You might be doing this as a volunteer. So you need to think about the impression that you're making when it lands. So the impression you're making on that post alone, but then what impression that makes for your brand as a whole. So, you know, don't say something unless it's really important to be said. So make those posts informative and useful. Don't just post for posting's sake. Make sure it is really informative and useful, because that's making a really good impression. We talked about the anatomy of a social media post, so making it scannable. So whatever platform you're on, so if it's, you know, if it's Twitter, we're limited by the character count anyway, so that helps make it scannable. But for anything else you're on, you know, that's making, how can you make the very best first impression? Let's make it easy for people to read. Be really specific in your message and in your call to action. So don't use this as a chance to say 10 things. You know, just be really, really specific, because that's going to make the best impression as well. And I've talked already about making it real. So, you know, it becomes very evident if it's just something that's produced by AI alone. AI might help you form the first draft, but yeah, please make it human. And then spell check. So the platforms now are much better at enabling us to be able to edit our posts, so or delete them and then do them again. But do spell check to make sure that the content you're putting out is accurate. You've got the ability to infuse your personality into each post as well. So this could be your personality as an individual. So we hear a lot now about personal brand. So if that's something that's relevant for you, if you're on Facebook, you know, as the founder or leader of an initiative, or you're on LinkedIn to represent your business, that infusing your personality is really important. But it's also really important for your brand as well. So for the organization you represent, you know, actually, again, we're all humans. So what's the personality of your brand and how can you put that through? If you've got more than one person posting, you really don't want it to feel like you can tell the difference. So, you know, yes, be authentic and genuine and show off your unique voice, but make sure it's consistent with the brand as well. And, you know, actually you can infuse your personality by telling a real life story or personal experience as well. And giving audiences an inside look can help infuse personality too. So if you've got a team meeting, so I'm a trustee for a local charity, and we did a Macmillan coffee morning recently in September, and actually we were then able to share that on social media. It was a bit of an inside look. It showed the personality of the team, showed that we all like cake. So yeah, think about where you can infuse your personality in. You also need to make sure you're being really clear and consistent. So I'll talk a little bit about scheduling tools as well. So if you can produce, for those of you who are writing regularly, actually, do you produce one at a time, or do you produce them all at once? If you can produce them all at once, they don't have to be posted together, but you can then read through them and make sure that that consistency is there. And also, you know, for those of you who pledge to do it regularly, if you're going on holiday and you pride yourself on doing it more than once a week, and you're the only one who does, and then you're away for 2 weeks, you're not being consistent. So think about those scheduling tools. It used to be you'd have to use something like Hootsuite or Later to do that. You can now schedule directly in platform for lots of the social media. So it's worth looking at whether that's the right thing to do as well. But if you batch it ahead of time, you're being consistent. If you keep to one clear message in each post, you're being really clear. Also scheduling your content when you know your audiences are online. That's a really good point of consistency as well. I doubt any of you post in the middle of the night, unless your audience happens to all be, you know, out looking at bats at 2 in the morning or whatever it might be. But yeah, think about that clarity and consistency. And another point I wanted to make on consistency is around repurposing your content. So, you know, we're talking here specifically about social media, but what else is happening elsewhere outside of social media that you can repurpose? So we do a lot of work on campaigns, and we might say, you know what, we're going to produce one piece of content, and then we can use that in loads of different ways. It becomes 5 blog pieces, it becomes 10 social media pieces, it becomes a webinar. So think about how you can either repurpose your social media content elsewhere, or how you can bring in what's happening elsewhere into your social media. But last point here is around the 80-20 rule, and this is really, really important. And this is where a challenge can come in sometimes. You need to be thinking, and especially we see this a lot in B2B, it's about your audience, it's not about you. And so you need to make sure that you're not just broadcasting at them, and that you are giving them things that are more of value. So have a look at your content and make sure that, you know, 80-20 might be ambitious at the moment, but think about, you know, are you informing, educating, or entertaining your audience more than you're asking them stuff? So, you know, events can come under informing and educating, so that fits into your 80%. But if you're asking people to help you fundraise, for instance, or if you're asking people to volunteer, that's a direct ask, and you need to do less of that. So you need to warm them up and give them things of value, and for them to build that sense of brand equity before you directly ask them stuff. So in all cases, it's about them, not about you. Okay, so I've got another poll now, and just to touch on something that we've talked a little bit about already. So in terms of, for those of you who are responsible for your social media, I'd really like to know a little bit about the barriers that you're facing. So this is our penultimate poll. Well, that was hard to say. And let me bring this up, because what I'd really like to understand now is about your barriers and your frustrations. So let me launch this poll. So we talked about some of these things already, but I'd be really keen to get your views. What's your #1 barrier or frustration in using social media? So that's live now. So is it that you've not got enough time? Would you like more time? Is it that you're not getting enough engagement? So you think like, oh, what's the point? People aren't engaging and reacting the way I need to. Are you struggling with not knowing what content to post, and that's your limiter right now? Or are you not facing any barriers? So let's get that one underway. Lovely, thank you. So seeing votes come in now. So we do have one winner that's ahead at the moment. So I'll just leave this going for a few more seconds. Excellent. Okay, so we've got 20 votes now. So I'm going to end the poll so that you guys can see all of that as well. And so what we have got is that the #1 barrier or frustration from you all that participated is around not having enough time. So we talked a little bit about time already, and we'll talk a little bit more about it as well. So absolutely understand that one. Yes, I think you're right, Nick. Not enough time, not enough engagement. It is a vicious circle. I think you're right there, actually. Absolutely. And actually, it can really motivate us when we get that engagement as well, can't it? And it kind of, you know, gives us confidence, and it bolsters sort of our sense of motivation, and we want to do more. And actually, sometimes the more time you spend on it, the more engagement you get. So I think Nick's right from that perspective. But interestingly, that whole not knowing what content to post is potentially, you know, a barrier as well. And so I hope that some of the slides that we've shared so far that give you some sort of, you know, advice and ideas around some of that new content might be quite useful. And what I would say, if you're not necessarily sure what content to post, one of the other things to do is to think about who's doing it well. Who do you like that is doing it well? So it could be an organisation that's similar to yours. It could be an organisation that is very different but works with a similar audience to yours. They can potentially be your inspiration as well. So that can potentially help. The other thing that can be really good if you don't know what content to post is have a look what's happening like in the local environment. So what's topical right now, what awareness days are coming up, what's happening in your community more widely that you can dive into. So it doesn't always have to be about you. That might be a way of kind of bringing up that confidence, is to talk about other things that are happening as well. Now, interestingly, we've got 4 votes that are feeling that something else is a barrier, and we've got one person who doesn't face any barriers. And so I'd really like to ask those 5 people who've either said something else or don't face any barriers, would one of you be up for talking? Just pop something in the chat if you feel confident in just sharing. Anybody want to sort of say what the barrier is outside of those time? Yes, Sandra, you're waving.
Because we haven't used it, I don't know how to use it, don't know how to set up a page properly, how to set up a group page, and it's just basic how you do it.
Yes, yeah, it's that first step, isn't it, Sandra? Okay, and so although we're covering kind of a greater area here today, what I would say to you, is that something you're open to? I know Imogen put some great sort of advice in the chat there, and what I'd also say is that if it's for Facebook, they do have their good online kind of help guides as well, so that can be something to look at. So it's something I can always send around afterwards if that's useful, and it will take you through that step by step how to do it. And it can always feel a little bit like gobbledygook when you first go into a new system and platform, because it looks different to anything else. But hopefully the step-by-step guide could help you with that, Sandra. So I think that's a fair enough barrier. So Bay Tree Cottage has talked about overwhelm. Fran, you were happy to talk about your barrier. Did you want to take to the platform as such? Oh, we can't hear you, Fran. Maybe you can share in the chat if you're not able to speak at the moment. And about Thetford, yeah, just an interesting point there. So you've got a team for social media, and so that's a huge benefit. So we're presenting this today to give you all some sort of top tips on how you can do it yourself. When you have a team and that's their job to do, they live and breathe this all the time, and it's their job to keep up to date and to be able to think about how best to project sort of campaign content and so on. And so that's fantastic that there's a team there to do it. So yeah, that was great. About Thetford, so you've raised a hand.
I just wanted to add that we got different age groups working on our social media. Brilliant. So we've got from mid-50s down to early 20s, though that there's not loads of us. It's quite useful to have that different perspective from different age brackets as well. So as long as you've got someone kind of managing the overall picture, so everyone's on the same sheet, you can use, within an organisation, even if it's a group of volunteers, different people to do social media with you to get that sort of cohesive voice that speaks to all age brackets.
Yes, yeah, that's great. And actually you raise a really good point there as well around that idea of sort of brainstorming and bench checking with others. That can be a really, really useful thing to do on in a community environment as well as within an organization. So that's really useful. And yeah, I think it can be quite powerful when you get a group of people in the room to talk about the same message, and they can look at it in different ways and have different ideas. And they say, don't they, that if you get just two people in the room, you end up with 3 sets of ideas, because you get the ideas that each person brings and the ones that you create together. And it can be really powerful if you then kind of extend that out further. So it's definitely useful to have those conversations, and we find that those kind of conversations as well can get greater buy-in. So if it's an organisation that's going to be going into social media for the first time, actually asking everyone what they think and getting their buy-ins at the beginning can be your greatest sort of kind of in-house engagement right from the off. Okay, that's great. Thank you so much for participating in that. So we've got one last poll to go, and I'll come on to that shortly, but thank you so much for sharing all your views there. And yeah, do keep adding all of those suggestions into chat as well. So I can see Nick there's suggested that maybe the partnership can support this more as well with some of those help guides, which is great to see. So excellent. Okay, so just going back to the presentation then, I'd like to just talk to you about a case study. So a lot of what we've talked about so far, I guess, could be theory, couldn't it? And I don't necessarily know your organisations and your messages and some of the challenges you face. So I just thought I'd give you an example of something that we got involved with last year in Cambridgeshire called Warm Hubs. So we were approached by an organisation that was creating a network of 40 warm hubs across Cambridgeshire to help sort of deal with the cost of living crisis, I guess, and saying, if you're not able to put your heating on at home, come into our warm hubs, that are running in the local communities, you know, certain days, certain times, and be able to come together as a community to enjoy a warm welcome, you know, a hot drink, a warm space, and the ability to support each other and engage with each other as a community. So we pitched for the work, and we were involved in sort of brand identity and the messaging and the launch and so on. But at that point, the organisation said to us, well, these are physical spaces, so we don't need anything digital. Actually, we've already got the great relationships with the village halls that are going to be running these, and they've got the volunteers for it. And we're going to do a lot of kind of grassroots support within those local parishes. So we don't need anything digital. And we said to them, oh, but we think you do. And actually, we think it'd be really powerful to create a digital place for warm hubs as well as the physical space, because it's an opportunity for those communities to be able to engage with each other online as well. And so we set them up with a Facebook page. So that's all they've got in terms of their digital profile, but it achieved, you know, a huge amount of impact right from the very beginning, and it's continuing to work for them now in terms of the rollout. So we constructed that brand new Facebook page for them. They didn't feel that they needed it, but they said, all right, we believe in you, Keystone, off you go. And we gave them a dedicated hashtag. We created bespoke messaging and a toolkit for that as well. So we said to all of those parishes, so there's 40 places across Cambridgeshire, we've got a Facebook page. We want you to all be admins to this, to be able to go in and talk about what you're doing in your part of Cambridgeshire, you know, what days you're open, what events you've got going on, your call for volunteers and so on. Let's have one digital home and one key space where we can all talk about this initiative. We did some regular posting to best practice principles. So we created evergreen content that they could use again and again and again. And we kind of created that best practice for them that they were then able to have the confidence to deliver themselves. And we started to use that platform to tell the story of warm hubs. So we showed the volunteers and the residents in action. And as I said, we gave those warm hubs themselves the ability to be admins into this group, to talk about what they were doing. And it became a safe space for everybody to talk about how amazing these hubs were. And I think because they were growing from the beginning, it was an idea that then took hold and became a real kind of, you know, a brand and a community with a life of its own. The Facebook group became a place where everybody was really happy to do that. But what we also did is we encouraged the core group, and we did it for them at launch as well, is to respond to comments to create a two-way conversation. So a lot of the time what can happen is we can be so focused because we've not got time, maybe of just posting the content, and we tick it off and we think, well, that's done now. But actually responding to comments creates that two-way conversation, and it makes people feel that they're part of something. And what we ended up creating through that Facebook group was that deeply embedded online community, and it's got about 300 followers. So warm hubs were created for last winter. They've then continued because the volunteers wanted to continue them, and they're now called the Cambridgeshire Community Hubs. And that online community is now there and strengthened and is rolling out in warm hubs in its new form. So if we didn't have that, warm hubs is now ended. It's now a new brand, Community Hubs Network. And we've still got that online community, and we've still got that regular group of hundreds and hundreds of people that are running these warm hubs across Cambridgeshire that still come together to tell each other what they're doing, to learn from best practice, to be able to share in their own communities what they're doing. And it's not just one person that's running that content. But I think it's quite interesting that originally there was not a need to do that. It was felt that because these were physical places in local communities that already had good relationships, they did not need a digital home. And we've shown to them that the creation of a digital home has actually elevated and that brand and created greater brand equity and support. So that's just something I wanted to sort of bring in there. Okay, in our final section, I'd now like to talk about assessing your impact. So some of you earlier told me that, you know, you're in the platforms regularly and you're posting. So I want to understand, you know, how often are you assessing your impact as well? So we've got a section on that. So how do you truly know if what you're doing is working? Now, there is a common phrase, and I won't say it properly because I never get it right, but it's something like, if a tree falls in a forest and there's nobody there to hear it, does it make a noise? And I think we can think about social media in the same way. We hear a lot, don't there? There's lots of noise on social media. There's always lots of noise. And you could post something brilliant, But if nobody's seeing it and engaging in it, is it working? And I'd say no, it's not working. And it's that same analogy of the tree falling in the forest. If nobody's there to hear it, does it make a noise? It's the same for you guys as well. And so I'm really mindful that in all of these things, you know, we start at the beginning by thinking, right, what's the right platform? Who are our audience? You know, what do I need to say and how? It's really important to make sure that you're assessing that it's working as well, because there's so much effort that goes into it, and so it's important to make sure you know how it works. So this is our last poll, and I want to ask you a little bit about that assessment. So how do you evaluate, or how often do you evaluate your social media? So I'm conscious for you, Sandra, this is one that is difficult. I guess we could say you think about it lots, but we can't talk about measuring it because it doesn't exist at the moment. So probably, apologies, this perhaps isn't one for you, but I'd really like to know for everybody else here, do you formally measure your social media activity regularly, intermittently, or not at all? And let's have a look at that as well. So lovely, thank you. So there's some votes coming. And so those of you who have voted regularly, I'd be keen to sort of know whether that's something formal. So we, for instance, we do it formally. So for some of our clients that we do that for, we get to the end of a calendar month, and then the following week we're assessing that month activity. So that's very formal. Or by regularly, it's just like let me just check how that post performed. So yeah, pop into the chat how that regular measurement works. For those intermittently, yeah, again, pop into the chat again what you mean by intermittently, that would be great. And for those that don't, I'd be interested to know why. So that might be time, it might be sort of lack of understanding of how you can. So is there anybody that would like to sort of give us their sense as to how they what their thoughts are on measurement and how they measure it? Anyone we've not heard from that's happy to comment and share? And I'm sorry, Fran, you're not able to access your microphone, so I'm sorry we didn't hear from you last time. Okay, so we're hearing a few things in here. So yeah, so Baytree, check when you think about it. Hazel, you're tracking monthly on a spreadsheet and track by post. That's great, because I guess you can see changes and trends there as well, which is good. So about Thetford, so your team, you've got a formal monthly report and you're checking informally as well. So project report, you're recording followers and reach monthly. So that's great for those of you that are tracking and recording regularly, because you can then, you're bench checking what you're doing and you can track back and you can see where those trends are. So that's great to see. Fran, lack of understanding about the metrics, I'm going to talk about that. So hopefully that will be quite helpful for you as well. So yeah, thank you for sharing all of those. So we've got a mix of things there. So I don't know if I posted the poll results, so let me go back in to that and I can share that with you. Okay, so for those of you who voted, it's pretty much even Stevens between those that check regularly and those that check intermittently, but we have a number of you who don't check, and it might be like Fran, you're not sure about the checking. Yeah, and Hazel, you check reach against engagement, see which posts work best and benchmark from there. So yeah, that's great. So that's really good. You know, we were talking earlier about, you know, what content you produce, and a lot of it is around looking at what lands best with your audience, and then you can create more like that. That's great, and you only know that by measuring it. So yeah, well done for that, Hazel. That's brilliant. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the techniques around the metrics then. So the first thing I just want to shout about is about timing. So in terms of how you measure whether it's working, a lot of it is about when you post. So if you have a system like HubSpot, for instance, or you've got a paid version of Hootsuite, I don't know how your team do it about Thetford, but you might use a platform that will say, post this at the time that most of my audience is online. And that's you entrusting in the platform to post it at a time that works. I've got on the screen here a bit of a heat map in terms of what the internet tell us, in terms of generally around Facebook and Instagram. So the darker is the highest engagement. So if we look at Facebook, generally that greater engagement is around kind of mid-morning to early afternoon. You know, this isn't a fail-safe for everything, but it's worth looking at. The lowest level of engagement on Facebook tends to be very late at night or very early in the middle of the night, I suppose we would say there. And you can see a similar heat map there for Instagram. So the first thing I'd say in terms of measuring your effectiveness is think about when you're posting your content. It might be that you want to put a marker in the sand and say, we're always going to do the same day, same time, and you create your own. So find the timing that works for your audience, and then you just stick to it. So we do that for one of our B2B clients. We've said to them, it's always going to be at lunchtime on a Wednesday, because for some reason, lunchtime on a Wednesday is where their audiences are always engaged the most. So even though we might have something to say on another day, we hold it to a Wednesday because we know that's going to get greater visibility for them. So think about your timing and your frequency around that timing. So if we look at the heat map for LinkedIn and for Twitter, so again, that kind of morning to mid-afternoon tends to be the sweet spot for a lot of the social media platforms, but it very much will depend on your audience as well. It can be really interesting. You know, I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit for the business, and I see quite a lot of my network, if they're business owners, will tend to do stuff at weekends. We also know that a lot of people on a Sunday night, you know, might be scrolling with a glass of wine before the week starts. So, you know, this isn't a fail-safe for everybody, but if you're wanting to review your timing and frequency, having a look at those heat maps might be useful for you. And then there's a number of analytical tools. So Fran, this might be helpful for you. And these tools we see as essential, as it says there, to not just measuring your social media activity, but also to help you build and execute it at the front end. So once you know what's working, like some of those that are, you know, looking at what's working really well, once you know what's working, you feed that back into the front of the cycle again. Like, right, how do we build more like this? How do we construct more like this to get more of the same? But you've got to keep measuring, because things change. The social media platforms change, trends change. So by measuring, you're making sure you've got an informed view as to what's working. And it's all about understanding that impact. So for About Thetford with your social media team, actually they're going to be wanting to look at the effectiveness of an overall campaign as well. So looking at the individual metrics helps to create a sense of the whole as there as well. So I've got a screen grab here, which I know you won't be able to see, but it's hopefully illustrative of what metrics are available within the platforms. So if you are posting right now on Facebook, on Twitter/X, on Instagram, on any of them actually, LinkedIn, etc., there's an element where you can dive in and you can access the engagement. So it's called different things on different platforms. So it'll either be called engagement, it can be called insights. And it gives you the ability to dive in and to have a look. And within there, what you can see is you can see how an individual post has performed. So how many people have seen it, clicked, etc. It does that kind of benchmarking of each one that you can see in the center there, which one of you was talking about in the chat. So it can say, right, here's all your posts from the last month, and here's how they've ranked against each other. So that's really interesting as well. It can show you how visible your posts have been over the week and how many visits you get maybe to your LinkedIn company page based on what post you put out there. So you can see spikes and you can see peaks and troughs. So that's really useful as well. And it gives you a sense really as to how, as I say, each individual post is performing, but also how the whole is performing. Now, for those of you who are active on LinkedIn and have company pages, you've got the ability as well to see how your content benchmarks with your competitors. So in a company page, you can say, my competitors are X, Y, and Z. And every month it will give you a sense as to how you rank against those competitors as well, in terms of level of engagement and in terms of number of followers as well. And the other thing that these in-platform analytic tools give you as well is a sense on your follower numbers generally. So how many more visitors have you had to your platform that month, and how many more visitors have you had as well? So it gives you the very specifics, and it also gives you the wider whole. So these are free. They're in platform. They're available to use, and I'd encourage you to have a look. So Fran, I don't think you were sure about the insights. I'm not sure what you're using at the moment. But if you are on social media, I'd encourage you just to have a look when you're on the page, go into insights, and just all of these things will come up for you. They're generated automatically. You can split to look at a particular day or a particular month or a particular period, and it could give you some really good insights. So these are the sort of things that tools will show you. So just to highlight again some of the things that we've talked about. One of the things I haven't mentioned in there is about number of mentions. So Twitter has always done this really well. In the analytics, it will say you've gained this many followers this month and you've had this many mentions. And that's all about, you know, who's talked about you. And so that can be a really good way of kind of seeing which stakeholders or other businesses are engaged with you as well. So some of those analytics will be more important to you than others. So it's about picking which ones are most important to you. I think overall engagement is a really good thing to look at. So, you know, most of you said you wanted to boost brand engagement. So generally each month, how are you doing? How many more eyeballs have you had on your content? And I think number of interactions, maybe on particular posts, is going to be quite important to you guys as well. So Nick talked about events for so on. So, you know, how many people are seeing our events is probably something that's quite important as well. But there's lots of other things to think about in terms of your analytics. And I'd encourage you to have a look at those. Because actually, when you're doing really well, it's really good to see that, gosh, you know, this many more people have seen our content, or this many more people have been helped by what we've put out there. But it also gives you a chance to just make sure that what you're producing is benefiting the most impact and engagement. Okay, so I'm coming to the end of the formal presentation now. So I wanted to leave enough time for any Q&As and to also be able to sort of hand back over to Nick to sort of talk about the next steps in terms of your other workshop opportunities and so on. So we've covered a lot today. I'm going to go through a recap in a minute, but you'll remember a couple of polls ago I asked you what those key barriers were. So a lot of it is around not having the time, not knowing what to post, and not necessarily getting enough engagement to kind of feed your activity. So as we start to sort of summarize everything, I just wanted to look at each of those things in turn. So firstly, for those of you that are struggling with time, just be really honest about how much time you can give. In this day and age, there never seems to be enough time to do anything. So yeah, be really honest with how much time you can give. And you know, if you can only give a small amount of time, that's okay. Just commit to doing it. And to think about whether batching your posts together can help. So we will often say, you know, to people, if they're responsible for social media and they're a volunteer, think, well, maybe find the same time each week to do it. A Sunday afternoon with a cup of tea, or a Thursday night with a glass of wine, and see if there's a way you can weave it into your life in a way that makes it enjoyable, that's hard coded and landscaped into your week. For About Thetford, I know you've got a social media team. You probably don't want to advise that they're doing all theirs with wine, but for those of you that are trying to fit it into your life outside of work, it might be nice to do it, you know, at a time where you're feeling sort of refreshed and relaxed. Using scheduling tools can really help as well. So thinking about writing all your content together and batching it together and scheduling it all at once, it means you're only going in once. And also make sure you're interacting in the same place. So if you have only got a limited amount of time, think about that primary social media platform. So if that's Facebook, just spend the time in there, and maybe you don't need to worry about Instagram or X right now. You know, actually, you don't need to be everywhere, just be in the right place. One of the other things that can really help save time as well is build an editorial calendar. And so this can work in two ways. It can either be like an ideas place, which is stipulating all the different types of things you can talk about. So you can pull one of those out and think, right, today I'm going to talk about this. Or it can be an editorial calendar, which is a list of all of your content. You could ask other people to put all their content in there as well. So having it all in one place can really, really help, rather than thinking, oh my goodness, what am I going to say today? And another way of saving time is looking at where you can repurpose your content. So we've talked about that as well. So what else is going on for your audience, in your sector, in your organization, where you can repurpose it. So we do this quite a bit for clients as well. So if blog content's written, that can be, you know, 5 different social media posts at different points in a month. So think about that. I'd also encourage you to take advantage of free tools. So I talked earlier around there being a need for a really good quality image. So you can get that through those imaging sites that I talked about, but there's also great free tools like Canva. And so for those of you that are quite creative and like to create your own materials, Canva is can be a free to use graphic design kind of building platform where you can go in and you can add your own images, you can create your own illustrations, you can add your own icons and logos and so on, and you can build your own materials that way. It takes time, but if you create a template that then represents your business, it then saves time once you're up and running. And so it can be very small things like just making sure you've got a stamp in the corner of your logo, or making sure that, you know, every time a post goes out, it's always in a frame of your brand's color or whatever it might be. So once you produce those templates, they do save time afterwards. I've talked about their scheduling tools already, but I would also say be patient. So for those of you that aren't on as much and you're looking to do more, just think about the fact that things do take time. We need to think about this as planting a seed. So I really like my gardening, and I'm going to be propagating some seeds through the winter, ready for the spring. And I plant that seed in the ground, but it doesn't sprout straight away. So it's about being patient. And from a marketing perspective, people often need to see things 7 or 8 times before they engage, and they're not always ready to engage at the time you post your content. So things can take time, so do be patient. So we talked about audience as well today. So we talked about content as well today. So write for your audience. So think about that number one persona. So who is your Bob? I think it's Bob I used, wasn't it? Who's your Bob? And write for him. And so that will really help your content curation if you're thinking about that individual you're trying to engage with. Be really consistent in your writing and your posting. And I talked about the anatomy of a perfect post. So make sure you're constructing your content to that best practice, because that's going to make it fly. Repurposing again fits here too. We've talked about call to action as well, so make sure it's really, really evident, so that you're telling people what it is that you want them to do. Think about who you can be inspired by as well. So I think some of you didn't necessarily know what to post and where to start. So who's doing great stuff out there? And what I would also encourage you to do in the chat is put your own social media handles. So actually, if you would like, to be able to showcase what you're doing right now, and you'd like some of the other people in the group to follow, actually you could give them great ideas for what they could do. So there's people out there you can follow and learn from, and I think you can follow and learn from each other as well. So finally, on engagement, if you're really clear on your audience and you're writing for them, actually that's definitely going to help the engagement. We talked at the very beginning, so Imogen talked about access to groups. So actually, to increase engagement, think about who else has access to your core groups. If they're over here on the left interacting and you're over here on the right, actually you need to go left to access them. So who else has access? How can you engage with them in other places? We talked a little bit about advertising. So think about advertising as a likely win. So if your follower numbers and your organic engagement is low, advertising can be a really great way of increasing engagement with the audiences that are really important to you. So think about that. We looked at analytics, so actually that can really help engagement. So actually, how are your audience behaving? What things do they respond to? Actually, one of my colleagues at one of my clients, he's writing things from a B2B perspective, but he puts pictures of his dogs on LinkedIn because that tends to get a greater reaction. Nothing to do with dogs. He's talking about something to do with business, but the tongue-in-cheek bit of him puts about his dogs, and it makes an impact. So actually, analytics can help understand your audience behaviors and increase engagement. So think about that as well. We talked about hashtags at the beginning, so that can give you greater reach. So what hashtags are popular? What hashtags are your audiences following? And if you use them too, that can help reach and engagement. And I haven't talked in a lot of detail about video, but video is proving to get greater engagement. So what video can you share? Who can share just 2 minutes to say hello? What behind the scenes can you offer in video? If you put video on, it's definitely going to get greater engagement. So here we go then, final training recap. So right at the very beginning, before I asked you about pineapple on pizza, or after I asked you about pineapple on pizza, I talked about what we were going to go through today. And thank you so much for staying with us, because it's an intense session here. You've been here for 3 hours, so well done sticking with it. And we started by looking at those major social media platforms, and I hope I've been able to help you identify the most effective for you. And if you already knew that, that's brilliant. Maybe we've been able to cement that thinking today, and at least you've got a little bit more understanding about some of those demographics and popularity of the platforms. We've looked at some of those hints and tricks about how you can build your future content. So we looked at those 6 types of content that are likely to create greater engagement. And we've looked at how to create a post in a way that's going to make it engaging. So some of those hints and tips. I've also talked to you about where you can get images and how you can build imagery. So yeah, lots of hints and tips today as well. And we've looked at both organic and paid social media approaches, so not in lots of detail, but we have looked at actually, is there an opportunity to get greater eyeballs on your business or organization by paying for it? So I would say in terms of organic, look at your follower numbers. Are those follower numbers good? Are you happy with who you're engaging with? Are they responding to you? Or are there others like them out there that you need to find? And can you find them organically, or do you need to look at advertising for that? But it's all about value. So if you are going to be advertising, make sure it's something of value and not just selling, because we're bombarded with sales messages all the time and people are turning off to that. And we've looked at some of those hidden tools that can support proactive social media activity. So by that, things like scheduling, things like looking at who else is doing good things. So how can you utilize those tools to be more proactive in your approach? So that ends sort of formal proceedings. I am going to ask Nick to step back in just to close things now in this last 5 minutes. And I'm happy to take any questions if we have time. But one last ask for you, which is in the chat. It's proven that when we write things down and we hear them, it's more likely to be cemented in. And I'm conscious I've thrown a lot at you. So before we close, I'd like you to put into the chat, if you're happy to do so, or if you're not happy, put it onto a pad of paper. What's your #1 takeaway from today? And if you can share it in the chat, that would be great for Nick and the team, because he, of course, this is all supported by the Brecks partnership. And this is something that they will then be able to use to demonstrate the effectiveness. So please do share, if you can, your #1 takeaway. And please do also share what you're going to do now. So it could be related to the takeaway, it could be very different, but based on what you've learned today, what are you going to do now? What have you pledged? What have you committed to? What are you going to take forward in terms of social media? It's been very much an introductory overview, but think about what you can take forward. So if you can share it in the chat, and if you can write it down, it's proven that you might be more likely to activate it. So that's it from me. I wanted to let you know that we have got something coming over to you that might help those of you who aren't active on social media, or those that want to activate more. And that is a number of questions that can help you build your social media plan, starting with that kind of big hairy goal at the beginning, what's your objective, through to the tools and templates you're going to use. So I will share that with you as well, because sometimes it can be very useful to get things out of your head and onto paper. So watch out for that coming soon. But yeah, hands up, that's you now. So if you can put that #1 takeaway into the chat, and if you could confirm to us what you're going to be doing next, that will be incredibly useful. Thank you.